Welcome to the Translated Chinese Horror Channel. Wishing you a wonderful day. Our family is descended from a line of physiognomists capable of divining life and death, a force of nature. My eldest sister excels at discerning good from evil, my second sister perceives the lifespan of others, and I can foresee how people will die. Only my fourth sister was adopted, she merely clings to my leg. After our father passed away, the emperor decreed a marriage arrangement for my sisters and me. When we chose our husbands in the Great Hall, my eldest and second sisters selected the imperial uncle and the crown prince, leaving only the prime minister and the general. My fourth sister knelt and implored me to reveal who would have the best outcome. I pointed towards the prime minister. But my fourth sister didn't trust my words, seizing the young general who secretly admired me. She considered herself clever, thinking I was intentionally concealing something, but she had no idea. From the very first glance, I saw that she would die by my hand. My father was the premier physiognomist in the land. His words were never wrong. The most famous instance was when the capital experienced torrential rain for 3 days and nights. He told others that a massive fire would erupt at the end of the eastern alley that night. No one believed him. They even made bets, eagerly wagering their money. All 10 households in the alley collaborated, extinguishing all lanterns and candles to see how my father could possibly be right. But as midnight approached, just as the night watch bell struck, a raging fire suddenly burst forth at the end of the alley. Fortunately, everyone was prepared and avoided disaster. Later, it was discovered that it was a matter of amorous affairs. A young lady had a secret rendezvous with her lover late at night, always relying on the light from the eaves. That night, they had to light a lamp inside the room for their rendezvous, their affection overflowing. A gust of wind blew, the lamp was overturned, and the straw ignited. The lover fled, and the young lady's reputation vanished into thin air. People gossiped and spread rumors, adding fuel to the fire. That young lady sought out my father. He assumed she was there to cause trouble, but she brought gold and silver to thank him, for he had allowed her to see the true face of her unfaithful lover, saving her from a life of misery. That was how my parents first met. They spent over a decade together in blissful affection. During those years, my father never read fortunes or divine destinies for anyone, regardless of their status or talent. Until I was 10 years old, my mother fell gravely ill and passed away. The illness came too quickly and fiercely. Before the medicine could be brewed, she was gone. She only managed to leave 8 words for my sisters and me: avoid the allure of schemes, shun the entanglement of physiognomy. Our family of 4 were all daughters. 3 of us studied physiognomy, except for our fourth sister. After my mother's death, my father became listless, like a man lost. Half a month later, he began to cast fortunes and divine destinies for the masses again. Initially, the world had forgotten who he was, but my father became even more arrogant than before, not only reading faces, but also daring to predict life and death. He used to say it was a divine secret that could not be revealed. I think my father no longer wished to live. In those 5 years, he used countless lives to solidify his position as the premier physiognomist in the land. 5 years later, the person he had been waiting for finally arrived. He was around 50 years old, with sharp eyes, wearing a thick cloak, surrounded by loyal attendants. One was dark and thin, with a solemn expression, another was pale-skinned with a shrill voice and gentle gestures. Everyone was cautious and careful. The court is treacherous these days. Can the master predict who will be the future emperor? My father laid out 4 coins, fortunes of the stars. It could be none other than these 4. There was nothing in this world that my father didn't know. When my mother was alive, he used his skills to please her. Which day the rice prices would increase, which day it would rain, which day it would snow, my father would only sigh, "Why don't you ask something more important?" My mother sat under the eaves watching the snowflakes, gently reaching out towards the heater. What is considered important? Should I know who will become emperor? At that moment, I ran up with a sprig of plum blossoms, inadvertently overhearing my father's reply. It's all right. Many people have inquired about that. I foresee the future emperor will be one of 4 people: Crown Prince Zhao Jie, Prime Minister Cui Song, young General Li Xiange, and Imperial Uncle Zhao Mingcheng. 5 years later, my father mentioned those same four names, and just for those words, our entire family was thrown into prison. The person who asked was the current emperor, but the answer he wanted was only the crown prince. On the surface, the emperor accused my father of bewitching the people, sentencing the entire family to death, but secretly, he personally went to the prison to ask my father who the future emperor would be. My father sat on the cold ground, his long hair falling down to cover his face, like a withered, decaying corpse. My daughters inherit my bloodline and can foresee the destiny of their husbands. After saying that, he closed his eyes for a long time. Which one is his daughter? In the dark prison, my eldest and second sisters remained as still as statues. I sat in a corner, somewhat absent-minded. My fourth sister clung tightly to my arm in fear. Third sister, I don't know anything. She was only 10 years old, just past the age of wearing hairpins, and always timid. That year, I went to the temple with my mother to pray, and on the way down the mountain, we encountered heavy rain. A beggar child chased after a small dog, falling into a puddle in front of the carriage. Just one look at her, and I told my mother to help. So, for 10 years, my fourth sister had always been closer to me than anyone else. I lifted her face so she would look directly into my eyes. Trust me, you'll be all right. Really? I gently squeezed her hand. Of course, you know my abilities. We were led before the emperor. He was also slightly surprised. No wonder, so it happens that there are four sisters. Their father Ming gave his four daughters simple names: Wang Chun, Wen Xia, Wen Qiu, and Zhuo Dong. The emperor asked our names and then inquired about our physiognomy skills. The first to answer was my eldest sister, Ming Wangchun. I can see through people's good and evil. People say you can know their face but not their heart, but for me, one glance is enough to know if someone is good or evil. The good and evil you speak of cannot be verified. My second sister, Ming Wenxia, spoke up. I know the lifespan of people. Then tell me, how much longer will I live? My second sister bowed her head and kowtowed deeply. May your majesty live 10,000 years. The emperor did not believe her flattery. You dare not tell the truth. Then tell me, among the people here, who is the closest to death? I want to see if it's accurate. My second sister raised her head, glanced around, and then slowly pointed to a corner of the wall. Him. The emperor followed her gaze. Him? He was an ordinary-looking guard. He immediately fell to his knees, his face pale, his body trembling. I sat next to my second sister. Taking the opportunity, I raised my head to look, only to be shocked by the scene that appeared in my eyes. Trying to calm myself, I noticed he had his head lowered and his fingers were subtly placed inside his boots. It could only be a hidden dagger. As the emperor approached, the guard suddenly jumped up, a flash of silver in his hand. It was an assassin. The entire hall erupted in chaos. I grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it in his face, drew the sword from the emperor's side, and stabbed him straight in the chest. His eyes were bloodshot, gradually closing, blood dripping from the tip of the sword onto the ground. This was also the first time I had killed someone. Taking a deep breath, before I could recover, I turned to look at the emperor, but the first thing I saw was my fourth sister. She looked back at me in a panic, lying prone in front of the emperor's chest, as if wanting to shield him with her body. But my eldest and second sisters were closer, still kneeling in their original positions, which calmed me down. I dropped the sword and knelt down. The emperor gently pushed my fourth sister away and stepped in front of me. What's your name? Ming Wenqiu, you know martial arts. I don't. You took half a step forward, so what was that scene just now? I raised my head and looked straight ahead. I was born with the ability to see death. As soon as I see someone's face, I see the scene of their death. The emperor paused slightly, his eyes deepening. I held out my hand, 2 fingers torn open by the sword. Today is the first time I've held a sword. I just acted impulsively. The emperor examined the wound, picked up the sword, and spun it lightly in his hand. So, you also saw my end, dying peacefully in my sleep. The emperor chuckled softly, unsure whether he believed it or not, and turned to look at my fourth sister. My fourth sister was so scared that she collapsed to her knees. My eldest sister quickly explained. This is my fourth sister, she is adopted, she doesn't know how to tell fortunes. The emperor held the sword and lifted her chin. Unexpectedly, there is still a useless one. My fourth sister trembled, forced to look up, terrified to the extreme. Your Majesty. The emperor's gaze swept over my eldest and second sisters, finally resting on me. I don't believe it. If it's really accurate, then try to guess whether I will kill her or not. Of course not. From the first time I saw my fourth sister, I saw the scene of her death. Wearing a dragon robe, with a crazed expression, holding a sword and stabbing a woman in front of him, only to be pierced in the chest by an arrow. Her feet were already unsteady. The other person seemed to have predicted it, immediately pulling out a hairpin and stabbing her straight in the throat. Remembering that scene, I could only tell the truth. Your Majesty will not kill her. Immediately after, the sword pierced my fourth sister's left chest. She clutched her chest in panic, blood spilling through her fingers before collapsing. The emperor withdrew his sword and coldly ordered her to be taken back to the palace for treatment. If you can't save her, then kill all four of them. 2 months later, my two sisters and I were taken into the palace. It was said that my fourth sister had long been saved and was now serving the emperor day and night, even clashing with a concubine. Today, the emperor not only summoned us into the palace, but also summoned the 4 people my father had mentioned. You want to grant my sisters and me marriages. On the left side of the great hall, 4 men sat upright, with extraordinary demeanors. 5 folding screens separated the main hall, and their faces could be vaguely seen through the gaps. Looking from left to right, the youngest were the young general and the crown prince, around 18 or 19 years old, the general with an aura of heroism, and the crown prince dignified. The most handsome was still the prime minister, and on the right, slightly older, was the prince, who was the current imperial uncle. My eldest and second sisters leaned close and whispered, while I was pushed aside. Over the years, those 2 sisters had always been distant from me, as if I were a heinous criminal. Not long after, the emperor arrived and ascended the throne. I want to see which of the 4 sisters has the best judgment of character. My fourth sister followed behind him, dressed as a noble lady. As soon as she saw me sitting behind the screen, she quickly walked to my side. Third sister. She sat close to me, and I reached out, gently pressing on her wrist. I knew how to take a pulse, and her wounds had indeed healed completely. With such severe injuries, even a martial artist would probably lose half their life. Third sister. She didn't realize what I was thinking, lowering her voice. His Majesty promised to let me and my sisters choose first. She looked at me, her face full of worry. If eldest sister and second sister choose first. I shook my head. It was precisely to let them choose first that we could obtain information. Why is that? Whoever eldest sister chooses proves that person is virtuous. Whoever second sister chooses proves that person is long-lived. But wouldn't the one left for us be either evil or short-lived? I looked distantly at the 4 men. The wicked are not necessarily defeated, and a short life is not necessarily my death. Knowing oneself and one's enemy is most important. My fourth sister still looked hesitant. She wanted to choose first, but she didn't have my talent, not knowing what to base her choice on. I trust you. The eldest sister took the jade pendant on the tray of the palace maid and went around the screen, revealing herself to everyone. Crown Prince Zhao was famous for his benevolence. 3 years ago, he personally went to Southwest to provide disaster relief, living and eating with the people, and even killing his own horse to cook porridge for them in times of difficulty. But unexpectedly, the eldest sister did not choose the crown prince, but gave the jade pendant to the imperial uncle. Imperial Uncle Zhao Mingcheng was the emperor's half-brother, with a calm temperament and profound strategies, and was also a staunch supporter of the crown prince. The eldest sister chose him, proving he was virtuous. I only needed to remember that. The imperial uncle was slightly surprised but accepted it. After all, he already had a princess. Adding another woman wouldn't hurt. The second sister chose the crown prince, meaning the crown prince had a long lifespan. The second sister placed the jade pendant on the table. The crown prince only glanced at it, his expression calm, not reaching out to accept it, as if nothing had happened. It's my turn. As I was about to stand up, my fourth sister grabbed the corner of my sleeve, collapsing to her knees, her voice choked with sobs. Sister, don't go, I don't know who to choose. Please tell me who will have the best outcome in the future. I paused. I couldn't speak because the first moment I saw someone, what I saw wasn't their face, but the scene of their death, horrific and gruesome. For example, those 4 men were laughing and talking together, but in my eyes, one was starving to death and made to look like a hanging, one was stabbed in the back, one was dying from illness in the grief of the entire palace, and one was killed by poison wine for burial. How could I say any of that? Especially since I couldn't tell my fourth sister that I would very likely kill her in the future. But my fourth sister clung tightly, and the palace staff watched without stopping her. I understood whose intention that was. Don't cry, I'll tell you. I hesitated for a long time and then made up my mind. Choose Prime Minister Choi Song. The moment I said that, her crying stopped and her voice became cold. Third sister, should I trust you? She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her face expressionless, stood up, took the jade pendant and turned to leave. She walked so fast that I didn't even have time to pull my sleeve straight. 2 palace staff members blocked me. By His Majesty's intention, the fourth daughter could choose first. It turned out that she had been deceiving me from the beginning, just to please me. In the end, my fourth sister didn't trust my words and didn't choose Cui Song, but chose young general Li Xiange. When Li Xiange saw that the person approaching was her, his expression froze slightly, his fingers clenched, not accepting the jade pendant, nor looking at her, but looking through the screen towards me, his eyes complicated. Among the 4, only he was unmarried, and he had once secretly admired me. The Li family's ancestral home in the East City Alley had been deserted for many years. When I was 10 years old, I climbed over the wall to catch an escaped parrot, which was also the first time I met the young general. He climbed the tree to catch it for me. 3 years later, I was out of mourning. In the summer, I went to Jingji Lake and met him rowing a boat to the middle of the lake to pick lotus flowers for me. The lotus flowers were delicate and the pink petals trembled, making people feel captivated. If my fourth sister hadn't interfered, I had originally intended to choose Li Xiange. I took the jade pendant, my fingers trembling, stepped out and walked past the crown prince. He was holding a teacup and suddenly spoke. Once a choice is made, it can still be changed again. The crown prince said that because he wanted me to choose him. After my father died, my 2 sisters and I became the only remaining magicians in the world. I was already an extraordinary person, and if I was loyal to him, I would surely become a great support. On the other side, Li Xiange accidentally touched the table, making a sound. If I choose Li Xiange at this time, saying it is because of personal feelings, I am afraid no one would believe it. On the contrary, it would only make people think that I calculated that he would become emperor, putting him in a position of being suspected by the royal family. And if I choose the crown prince, my second sister and I would have the same assessment. It would be difficult to lie to deal with it, and it would be even easier to be bound. So I had to continue walking forward, stopping in front of Prime Minister Choi Song. Choi Song was holding a teacup, slightly raising his eyes to look at me, his eyes deep, and then reaching out to accept the jade pendant. I had chosen him, neither meritorious nor guilty. The emperor granted the marriages one by one. When it was Li Xiange's turn, he tried to refuse several times, only to be scolded by the emperor. My eldest and second sisters were both named concubines, my fourth sister became the wife of the young general, and I became Choi Song's concubine. Reaching the palace gate, Li Xiange chased after me. Choi Song consciously stepped aside. Wen Qiu, today's matter was not what I wanted. Even if I marry her, I will not. I immediately interrupted him. Young general, we are all married now. We should not say such things. He was stunned, his eyes showing a hint of loss. My fourth sister also hurried over. Third sister, are you afraid I'm in a difficult position? It's just one man, what's it to me to give him back to you? She glanced at Li Xiangu as if looking at a trophy, because what I wanted was never a person, but a future position. My fourth sister moved closer to me, smiling gently. If you're willing, we can cooperate. Even if I marry him, I will never overstep my bounds. Li Xiangu turned around, his hands behind his back. No need, I'm not as skilled as you are in these calculations. I never intended to cooperate with him and my fourth sister. That night, I moved into the Chui residence. Chui Song had been married to his main wife for 3 years, and they had a deep affection. There wasn't even a concubine or a mistress in the residence. The emperor granted 10 days of temporary leave. Chui Song only came to my room on the first day, sitting quietly for half an hour without saying a word. Hearing about the events in prison, I knew a little about the situation. It was rumored that the Ming family was the bloodline of magicians, especially since this young lady could see the final moments of others' lives. Even the crown prince wanted to take her in. Choosing me today must have been a last resort. I looked straight into his eyes. I have already been chosen. Sir, please speak frankly. Asking me to predict your destiny is not impossible. Chui Song lowered his head and gently used the teacup lid to skim the foam. I want to know how I will die. What I saw was him standing in a pool of blood, tightly gripping a sword, with a crazed woman in front of him, her eyes bloodshot. Suddenly, a sword pierced him from behind. I slowly replied, Sir, do you really want to know? Once I say it, that death usually cannot be changed. Without waiting for him to stop me, I continued. Sir, you will die from being stabbed through the heart. Chui Song's fingers trembled slightly, and he put down the teacup. Who is it? I don't know. I lowered my eyes, my voice as light as the wind. I only saw that person stabbing from behind, and you were completely unprepared. Perhaps you should be wary of the people around you. After a long time, Chui Song stood up, repeating the words, people around me, raising his head to look out the window, clenching his fists. But I have no desire to compete for the throne, only hoping to live peacefully with a Hung. For the next 9 days, he no longer stepped into my room, and I was happy to let him ignore me. The crown prince was the legitimate heir, controlling the imperial guard in the capital. The prince had the support of the imperial clan, and troops were stationed. Yan Ling held his own. Then there was Li Xiangu, whose father, Li Zan, had garrisoned the northern border for over a decade, commanding an army of more than 200,000. Compared to them, Chui Song, despite his prestigious lineage as the offspring of a marriage alliance between the Qinghe Chui clan and the Yuanling Song clan, and despite being the top scholar, a leading figure in the Qinglu faction at court, possessing a jade-like demeanor and extraordinary refinement, lacked military power. Even with his exceptional appearance, how could he hope to contend for the supreme position among the four? Until the day I met young Hung, Chui Song's principal wife. She was the only daughter of the Duke of Qing, a founding pillar of the nation who had sworn brotherhood with Emperor Gaozu and been granted a hereditary title along with permission to maintain a private army. Logically, upon his death, if Yang Hung had a son, that army would be inherited by him. The first time I saw Yang Hung, she was hunched over her desk, writing, her hand supporting her chin, a gold amber bracelet on her wrist emphasizing her delicate fragility. But in my eyes, the scene evoked images of palaces engulfed in flames. She collapsed onto the desk, her robe half-soaked in blood, trembling as she handed me a letter and struggled to remove the bracelet from her wrist. I am the third daughter of the Ming family. She put down her brush and looked up at me. Startled back to reality, I smiled and nodded. Yang Hung was gentle and dignified. After just one meeting, I felt as if we were kindred spirits, our conversation flowing effortlessly. She gave me a large box of Donghai pearls and asked for my forgiveness in advance for Chui Song's coldness and indifference towards me after I entered the household. It doesn't matter. Lord Chui cherishes his wife, and I already have someone in my heart, so there's no such thing as indifference. Yang Hung paused slightly, then chuckled. I heard my husband say that day in the palace, the third miss caught the attention of both the crown prince and the general, so she had no choice but to choose him. I thought he said that to put my mind at ease. I smiled, neither confirming nor denying. Yang Heng seemed to realize she had spoken out of turn. "Third miss, calling me madam is too formal. Call me a Hung from now on." After that conversation, Yang Heng became even closer to me, inviting me to join her for breakfast every day. Occasionally, if I encountered Chui Song there with her, I would quietly excuse myself. Our relationship could be considered harmonious. 10 days later, Chui Song took me to the palace. On the way, we encountered 3 other couples. The eldest sister and the Prince of Xian respected each other like guests. The crown prince and the second sister seemed more like ruler and subject than husband and wife. Chui Song and I maintained a superficial harmony while remaining distant at heart, while Li Xiange and the fourth sister glared at each other like enemies. The emperor asked a few perfunctory questions about our families, then dismissed the consorts, keeping only the 4 of us sisters behind to ask, "Have you figured out who the future emperor will be?" To save our lives, all 4 of us tacitly replied that it was the man we had chosen. The emperor flew into a rage, coughing violently and collapsing back into his chair, yelling at us to get out. But after a moment, he told us to stay, specifically me and the 4th sister. He waved off the others for the time being. "Mingwen Qiu, you originally intended to choose Li Xiange that day, didn't you?" I calmly replied, "Your Majesty. That day I told the 4th sister that she should choose Prime Minister Chui Song. The palace maids can attest to that." The 4th sister simply misunderstood my meaning. The 4th sister hastily retorted, "Your Majesty, her words are certainly deceitful. She deliberately tricked me into choosing the wrong person. It must be Li Xiange." I looked up and stared directly at the emperor. "Your Majesty, if you believe that diviners can lie, then the words you once heard from my father, or even from my own mouth, are not to be trusted either. So why can't you lie? You dare to speak to me like this?" A teacup flew towards us like an arrow, shattering right in front of the 4th sister. Fragments of white porcelain scattered, accidentally cutting her cheek, drawing a trickle of blood. She didn't flinch, instead kneeling even straighter, quietly wiping away the blood on her cheek, knowing she had misspoke. The emperor's expression was icy as he waved the 4th sister away. He slowly walked towards me, each step heavy, his voice growing colder. "In the prison edict, I know that you and your second sister are hiding something." His words were slow, steady, and heavy. If it were truly as she said, longevity without worry, then I wouldn't have had to seek out your father. "I want to know, how will I ultimately die?" A blood-stained handkerchief gently fell before my eyes. Kneeling on the ground, I stared at the bright red bloodstain, my eyes darkening, my voice strangely calm. "Your Majesty, even goddesses can lie." I looked up, my gaze steady, unwavering. The emperor frowned, his expression faltering. I ignored his expression and, without waiting for his permission, stood up on my own. "Your Majesty, that day in the prison, I proved my abilities. Emperor or commoner, everyone dies eventually. If you want me to predict your future, you can't just ask. There must be a reward." I took a few steps back, turning to look at the emperor. "Of course, you can kill me, wipe out my entire family, but you will never get the truth from my lips. What do you want? Just try saying it." "I only want to know, how did my 4th sister recover from her illness?" The emperor was slightly surprised. It was simpler than he thought. He let out a soft breath. "Her heart is in an unusual position, neither left nor right, but higher, right below her throat. Therefore, a severe chest wound would not be fatal." I unconsciously reached up and touched my throat. "So that's it. That means the hairpin piercing her neck was really my doing." The emperor's gaze was sharp as he looked at me. "Now it's your turn to speak." I raised 3 fingers to the sky and swore an oath. "Your Majesty, I swear on the soul of my deceased mother, everything I say from now on will be the truth." When I left the palace, Li Xiange was already waiting outside and immediately stepped forward. "Is something wrong?" His voice was filled with concern. I gently shook my head. "In the distance, Chui Song is waiting for me. The eldest sister and the second sister have not left yet." A moment later, the eunuch announced, "The 4th miss will stay in the palace tonight." The 3 brothers-in-law almost simultaneously looked towards Li Xiange, who stood beside me and returned each of their gazes. "Why are you looking at me? I'm not the one staying in the palace." Chui Song glanced at him, told me to wait a moment, and then left on his own. The eldest sister and the second sister also left, especially the second sister, who turned back to look at me. I stepped into Li Xianji's carriage. The first thing he said was, "Ming 4th Miss, and I are husband and wife in name only." I gently lowered my eyelashes and calmly replied, "I know. She is the emperor's person." Li Xiange took out a delicate box of pastries, wrapped his hand in a cloth, carefully lifted it up, and presented it to me. "Even if she weren't, once my father returns to the capital, I will ask for a divorce from her." I gently accepted the pastries in his hand. His father commanded the northern border, while he, his mother, and his grandmother had long resided in the capital. Now that she had married him, the emperor also intended to warn him to send fewer letters back to the northern border. Li Xiange watched me eat, the corners of his lips curving slightly upwards, a hint of joy flashing across his face, and he obediently nodded. "I heard that you and your sisters can read fortunes for your husbands." "Yes." He suddenly held out his hand. "In front of me. Then can you read mine?" My mouth was still full of pastry, and my words were unclear. "I don't read palms, but looking at your face, you must be unparalleled in nobility." He echoed my words. "My father also believes in these things and once took me to meet a master who said I have the bearing of a dragon and phoenix. Do you think it's accurate?" I withdrew the smile from my eyes, gently wiped my mouth with a handkerchief, and looked up at him. "It's hard to say. Even the most skilled diviners can sometimes be wrong." "Then try telling me." He folded the handkerchief and tucked it into his chest. "First, it depends on the strength of one's fate. People with strong fates, flourishing 5 elements, intelligence, and strategy are easier to predict. But people with weak fates, unbalanced 5 elements, and who drift with the current are difficult to predict accurately. Second is the relationship. I myself cannot read my own fate, and the closer the relationship, the harder it is to see." I stood up, stepped closer, looked directly into his eyes, and then took another step, getting closer and closer. My father also said that if a diviner is too close to the person whose fate they are reading, frequently uses their abilities, they can even change that person's fate. He didn't expect me to get so close and looked down at me, gently pursing his lips. "Like this." I covered my mouth with my hand, lowered my head, and chuckled softly, "Of course not. It has to be as close as parents, spouses, or blood relatives to be close enough, like my mother who was destined for longevity, but ultimately died young because of my father." I stepped back to my original position and lifted the carriage curtain to look out at the street. "This isn't the right way." He coughed lightly, embarrassed. I told them to take a different route. "Have you ever met my mother?" "Li Xiange." I looked outside, my voice suddenly changing. He was stunned. "Never, but she must have been a very good person. Perhaps my father has met her." I lifted the curtain and pointed towards the alley. "My mother used to live in the alley next to your ancestral home. 19 years ago, there was a fire and your grandfather moved the whole family away. Your father must have met her back then." He frowned, preparing to stand up. The carriage suddenly stopped abruptly, the curtain fell, the box of pastries tilted, and I fell into his arms. Li Xiange reached out and supported my shoulders. "What's wrong?" I looked at his hand and, feeling slightly embarrassed, let go and stepped back. Outside, we were told that the carriage of the crown prince's consort was blocking the way. In the elegant tea house, the second sister was indeed waiting for me, but the person who was looking for me was someone else. In the secret chamber, the crown prince, Zhao Che, sat behind a low stone table, slowly pouring tea. He offered the teacup to me. "I heard from my sister that you know my father has less than a year to live. I want to know who dares to harm him." I lowered my eyes, took a sip of the tea, and said calmly, "You poisoned it?" Zhao Che froze, remaining silent for a long time, his 10 fingers stretched taut against the stone table, the fingertips white from the force. "Impossible, I would never do that." "How could I?" I held the teacup, looked around, and clicked my tongue softly. "Your Highness, there's no one here but me." "You should be happy." Not to mention whether you would do it or not, but if you ever did poison him, you would certainly succeed. He looked up sharply, his eyes darkening, and suddenly flung the teacup, smashing it against the wall. I don't believe it. How could my father force me to such an extent? I paused slightly, so he already believed it? To the point of seeking justification from others. I turned to leave. He said in a deep voice, stopping me. So why didn't you choose me that day? I can't succeed. I stopped in my tracks. Years ago, there was a severe drought in the southwest. The land was parched and cracked, and no grass grew. Your Highness provided relief for 8 months, but the government only provided 3 months' worth of rations, and yet in June, people were still able to slaughter horses for food. I turned to look directly into his eyes, my voice slightly questioning. Your Highness, were the things you slaughtered really horses? In the dark secret chamber, he looked at me for a long time, his expression unchanging, only the corners of his lips curling into a faint smile. Let bygones be bygones. I just want to know if there will ever be a day when Ming Third Miss is willing to follow me. A sound like a sword being drawn rang out from the dark corner. Even the candle flame by the door flickered violently. The winner is king, the loser is bandit. If your Highness succeeds, I will follow. Leaving the secret chamber, I met the second sister. Ming Wenxia sat by the window, looking at me coldly. I knew you would be fine. The way you say that is really heartbreaking. She didn't reply. I sat down and drank the cup of tea she had poured. I know that from a young age, the eldest sister and you didn't like me, but fortunately, I'm not sentimental. I only hope that you are both safe. I don't know what will happen in the future, but it certainly won't be peaceful. Half a month later, during the Mid-Autumn Festival, Cui Song planned to take Yangheng to the palace to visit his cousin, Consort Cui. I sat by the fish pond, bored, throwing feed to the carp. Yangheng saw I was idle and wanted to take me along. Cui Song disagreed, saying that the last time was due to an imperial decree, and I was only a concubine, so it wasn't appropriate to enter the palace. After all, I was only a wife in name. Yangheng grabbed my hand and insisted on arguing on my behalf. Cui Song rubbed his temples and looked at her helplessly, finally relenting. He and Yangheng sat next to each other, Yangheng talking and laughing naturally, Cui Song patiently responding, every word filled with affection. I sat far away, watching the swaying reins, falling asleep without realizing it. I woke up just as we arrived at the palace gate. Before getting out of the carriage, Cui Song glanced at me and subtly pointed to my forehead. I was slightly stunned and unconsciously looked at Yangheng. She had moved closer, taken out a powder compact, and gently dabbed it on my forehead, where there was a red mark from leaning against the carriage while sleeping. Perhaps you don't sleep well in the mansion because it's too boring. Yangheng said softly. It's not that. It's because my mind is troubled. In the palace, Consort Cui lay on a soft couch, her complexion pale, holding a brazier in her arms, with a blanket draped over her legs, as if she were very afraid of the cold. I stood behind Cui Song and Yangheng, secretly observing. She closed her eyes, her lips suddenly bleeding black blood that flowed down her chin, staining her neck. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and looked directly at me. You are a member of the Ming family. I was frightened and knelt down. Cui Song gently waved his hand. Cousin, she is my concubine. Consort Cui simply adjusted her blanket, accepted a new brazier, and sighed, a diviner? I once met your younger sister. Beautiful face, a pity for Li Xiange. I was silent. If my mother were still alive, she would probably be the same age as Consort Cui. Consort Cui, I not only know divination but also a little about medicine. Your Majesty's skin is so pale, and yet she is afraid of the cold. She may have been poisoned. Consort Cui dropped the brazier, and Cui Song quickly led us out of the palace. Half a month later, the entire court was shocked. The imperial physician discovered that Consort Cui had been poisoned for many years. The poison was called Snow Lotus Cloak, which wouldn't take her life, but would weaken her body and cause infertility. This poison could also be transmitted to the person in the bed next to her. The emperor turned purple with anger, and that night secretly summoned the imperial physician and ordered a search of the entire palace. Month later, it was discovered that the person who administered the poison years ago was the late empress, the crown prince's mother. That year, Consort Shui had given birth to a princess, who died at birth, also because of this poison. Rumors spread throughout the court. Was the reason the emperor hadn't had any more children for so many years also due to this poison? I thought the matter ended there. Unexpectedly, 3 days later, Consort Shui committed suicide to atone for harming the emperor's health. The person who came to announce the mourning also brought a rare jade lock. This was the jade lock that cousin had prepared for the princess's first birthday. Chui Song, wearing mourning clothes, walked past me, stepped onto the steps, and knelt before the coffin. I also changed into mourning clothes and quietly knelt beside him. The flames in the charcoal brazier shone red on Chui Song's face. He burned paper money, his voice cold. You knew it all along, didn't you? I was silent. I only thought she had been poisoned. I didn't expect her to commit suicide. I had good intentions, but if you hadn't said anything, she might not have died so quickly. He suddenly stood up, threw the pile of paper money, which hit my face, burning painfully. I raised my head and glared at him. How dare you hit me? The guests who came to pay their respects all turned to look. Yang Heng pushed through the crowd, pulled me behind her, covered my face with her sleeve, and led me to the room behind. That's just how he is. She carefully applied medicine to me, her voice gentle. With consorts passing, he's in a difficult position, unwilling to be dragged into the struggles. I said coldly, then resigned from his position. Yang Heng chuckled softly. Thinking of the funeral, she covered her mouth, and after laughing, she said, "Don't be so petty. Husbands and wives at home don't usually argue over right and wrong." I pushed her hand away. He's your husband, not mine. Yang Heng chuckled softly and placed the medicine bottle in my hand. What about Li Xiango? He wouldn't lay a hand on me. She told me to rest and that I didn't need to greet any more guests. That night, Chui Song came again. Since I had entered the mansion, this was only the second time he had stepped into my courtyard. There were 2 soft knocks on the door. About what happened during the day, I didn't mean to. I leaned against the window, holding a book, unwilling to respond. You also know how powerful divination can be. I was also frightened. I decisively put down the book and looked straight at him. It was you who asked yourself. I told the truth, but you got angry. As for consorts committing suicide to atone for her deceased daughter, perhaps the reason you die in the future will also be because you love someone. He was silent outside the door for a while, then turned and left. Consort Shui had been with the emperor for 20 years, favored for 10, and although she had no children, her death shook the entire palace. The emperor had no time to be angry with her and posthumously honored her as empress. As for the late empress, the emperor's anger was directed at the crown prince, especially since I had mentioned that there would come a day when the crown prince would poison his father. After this incident, the emperor believed my words even more. It was said that the Eastern Palace was heavily guarded and no one was allowed to enter or leave. The Prince of Xian, Zhao Mingqing, led the officials to kneel and beg for mercy, but it was in vain. Zhao Mingqing sought out Chui Song, but his door remained closed. At that time, Chui Song used illness as an excuse and spent half a month at home, keeping Yang Heng company. The eldest sister came to find me. She wasn't pleading for the crown prince, but only that your second sister is imprisoned in the Eastern Palace. I was arranging flowers and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, she won't die." The eldest sister snatched the thorny rose branch from my hand. "Mingwen Qiu, she is your own sister." My fingertip was pricked by a thorn, and the blood had just welled up when I smeared it dry. You see, people can still distinguish between good and evil, but what about me? I looked at her expression. From a young age, you two have been cold to me, isn't it because you see me as a bad person? Now that you need my help, you come to me. The eldest sister turned and left. That year, the Eastern Palace experienced an exceptionally harsh winter, but the Chui mansion was unusually warm. Chui Song used the pretext of national mourning and spent half of the month at home, keeping Yang Heng company. The two of them sat next to each other, burning incense and folding paper flowers. I sat by the brazier, holding a small fan, my eyelids drooping, so sleepy that I couldn't even hold the fan steadily, and it fell to the ground. Chui Song bent down and picked up the fan, placing it in front of me. Yang Hung turned around and said softly, "How about inviting generally to the mansion to bring some joy?" I blinked, slightly more awake. Chui Song only nodded slightly. Just as Li Xiangu arrived, the snow had just melted. He brought a large red peony, handing it to me personally. He and I stood in the courtyard, building a snowman. I decorated the snowman's shoulders and head with plum blossoms, the red standing out against the white. In the distance, Chui Song and Yang Hung were still in the paper room, the scent of incense faintly wafting out from under the eaves. But in the end, building a snowman turned into building a grave. Li Xiangu and I looked at each other, stunned, then burst out laughing, pushing the snowman over, trampling it into a pile of snow. Over there, Yang Hung wasn't careful to prevent the fire from catching in her hair. I hurriedly pulled Chui Song out. The four of us met, and we all burst out laughing. That day, I finished painting the 9/9's elimination of cold picture. Just then, terrible news arrived. The Crown Prince's consort had passed away. As the Crown Prince's consort, she held a noble position, equal to that of Yang Hung. The two had been close friends in their youth. The court prepared a grand funeral, and on that occasion, the Eastern Palace's confinement order was lifted. Yang Hung dragged me along to pay our respects. Although the Eastern Palace had many servants, it had very few official consorts, making it even more desolate. Even second sister, who had only entered the palace for half a year, had to come out to greet guests. Yang Hung looked at the Crown Prince's consort's memorial tablet and sighed. She used to be healthy, and I would often visit her. Later, fewer and fewer people were by her side, and that's when she truly fell ill. I quietly covered her mouth with my handkerchief. Before Yang Hung could understand what was happening, I dragged her into the carriage. She asked me, dazed, "When Shu, the Crown Prince, tangled like a ball of yarn, do you think my husband can succeed?" I hesitated for a moment and then replied, "You've said it yourself, his temperament doesn't care about the affairs of the world." Yang Hung nodded slightly, not mentioning the matter again, only unconsciously twisting the jade bracelet on her wrist. Since the beginning of spring, the Crown Prince had been secretly interfering with the appointment of officials in the capital. Regardless of the position's size, even if it was just a minor clerk in a government office, his handprints were faintly visible. What was noteworthy was that he didn't promote his own people but instead chose those who had just taken office the day before, only to die less than half a month later. In the blink of an eye, apart from the old veterans, officials who could hold their new positions for 3 months were considered old-timers. The bureaucracy in the capital was shaking violently, like an earthquake. Initially, the emperor didn't realize it and dumped all the burdens on the Ministry of Personnel. A complex problem concerning the official system could be said to be one in 1,000 years. Nearly 100 people in the Ministry of Personnel worked for 3.5 months without rest, and 2 ministers had already been replaced before the 3rd minister, guided by the Eastern Palace, reluctantly resolved it. The Crown Prince secretly took control of the Ministry of Personnel from that moment on. According to Chui Song, my second sister seemed to be by the Crown Prince's side. Another month passed, and the Crown Prince and Prince Xian became enemies. The source of the matter was when the Eastern Palace was sealed off. The emperor, in a fit of rage, gave the Crown Prince's Imperial Guard Tiger Tally to Prince Xian with just a verbal order. Now, the Crown Prince was forcing Prince Xian to return it. Prince Xian originally wanted to support the Crown Prince, but seeing the Crown Prince's recent decisive actions, which seemed autocratic, he refused to return it. Moreover, Ming Wangchun was instigating him, advising Prince Xian to keep his distance from the Crown Prince. A politically turbulent spring arrived. As I looked at the newly sprouting buds, I suddenly remembered something. The emperor didn't seem to have much time left. No wonder Zhao Che, the Crown Prince, was so anxious to reclaim the Imperial Guard. The world was about to be in chaos, and the military was the most important thing. That evening, Chui Song came to find me. He casually entered the room, sat on the heated bed under the window, and picked up my embroidery frame to examine it. For the past half-month, letters from a Heng's family had been more numerous than in the entire previous year. It was said that the Duke of Qing, despite his old age, still had boundless ambitions, having only fathered Yang Heng. He had secretly invited a fortune teller before her engagement, saying that Yang Heng had the fate of a princess. After marrying Yang Heng, Cui Song received support from the Yang family in the southwest and rose like a kite in the wind. I took the embroidery frame back from his hand. If he had so much to say, he should go back and say it to her. Why tell me? His hand was empty. Cui Song looked up at me, stood up. There's no need to say anything. I'll cut off all contact between her and the Duke of Qing. I didn't express any opinion, only seeing him to the door. At the door, he tilted his head to look at me. Have you been seeing Li Xuanga lately? I thought for a moment. Their family must be even busier than the Yang family. Cui Song stood beside me, bowing his head and chuckling softly. I was going to visit Yang Heng the day after next, but she caught a cold and wouldn't see me. On the 7th day of the 3rd month, the emperor's birthday celebration was held in the palace. He summoned me and instructed me to prepare a gift. Yang Heng and I sat in the same carriage. Cui Song sat in another. Yang Heng watched his departing figure, lowered the carriage curtain, and her voice fell slightly. Because of my father, he finds my presence annoying. I wasn't good at comforting others. Haven't you had this father since today? Yang Heng stared blankly at me, her eyes reddening, and then leaned on my shoulder and cried. After crying for a while, she fell asleep. The emperor's birthday celebration was less than half a year away, but his complexion looked even worse than before. I saw older sister and Prince Xian. Prince Xian's previous consort had just passed away from a serious illness. Older sister and Prince Xian had a deep affection, and she had now been promoted to princess consort. The crown prince attended the banquet alone. Whether second sister was truly ill or not was unknown. I only saw the crown prince entertaining several wives of military generals, also revealing his intention to take a concubine. During the banquet, I went to the back of the hall to change clothes and happened to catch older sister and the crown prince glancing past each other in front of the artificial mountain. I reminded older sister that the crown prince was deep in thought. Now that she was Prince Xian's consort and had a gentle disposition, I was afraid she would easily suffer. I hadn't seen Wen Xia in months, and even visiting the Eastern Palace was prevented. Ming Wanchun questioned me in return. Do you want your sister to only care about herself? Through the screen, I looked at her for a long time. She wasn't just caring about herself, so why didn't she advise second sister not to choose the crown prince? It was more frightening for evil people to live long lives. I said that and returned to the banquet, not even bothering to listen to what she said afterward. Cui Song was waiting for me, saying that the eunuch wanted us to move to the front table. When we were granted the marriage, Prince Xian and the crown prince were originally sitting at the head table. Li Xuanga was also seated in front because of fourth sister. Now, only Cui Song and I were missing. But that would leave Yang Heng alone. You stay with a Heng. The emperor summoned me only because he wanted to see me. Cui Song said again, it's a birthday celebration anyway. We're a couple granted by the emperor. Sitting together would add to the joy. Just then, Yang Heng accidentally spilled a bowl of soup. The soup flowed down her wrist and onto her arm, causing a commotion. I pulled her over. Is she okay? Cui Song gave her a handkerchief. Fortunately, it was cold. Yang Heng bowed her head without speaking, wiping her hand with the handkerchief. Her fingers turned red, and she took off the honey-gold jade bracelet on her hand. This bracelet is precious. It can't get wet. The eunuch urged Cui Song. Cui Song advised me to go with him and return to Yang Heng later. Yang Heng stood there fumbling, unable to remove the bracelet. She seemed angry with herself, her face flushed, and her forehead was covered in sweat. I thought for a moment and told Cui Song to wait. I took Yang Heng's hand and helped her take off the bracelet. Her pulse was stable. I lowered my eyes and said softly, Heng, have you gained weight? Yang Heng slowly turned to look at Cui Song. I'm pregnant. Cui Song was stunned. Yang Hung just looked at him like that, calling a palace maid to her side, saying she wasn't feeling well and asking for a doctor. Chui Song didn't have time to stop her. That evening, the news of Yang Heng's pregnancy spread throughout the palace and out to the capital. I went alone to sit on the front row of seats. Before long, the birthday wishes and gifts began to be presented. The Crown Prince presented a petition of blessings from the people, and Prince Xian presented a screen of longevity. Chui Song presented calligraphy and paintings from famous masters of the past, and I presented a blood-red parrot. When it was Li Xuange's turn, he presented 2 Akultek horses brought from the northern frontier, thousands of miles away. The gifts were precious, but the loyalty of the northern frontier army was even more precious. Fourth sister presented a painting of mother-child affection by an unknown artist. Clearly, Li Xuange had no idea about this. The entire hall held its breath. No one dared to breathe loudly. Until the emperor looked at the painting, tears fell on his face and the crown prince knelt down a few dozen steps, using his sleeves to wipe the emperor's tears, sincerely admitting his mistakes and crying for a while. The father and son temporarily reconciled. Li Xuange saw me sitting alone and came to my table to offer a drink. What was he up to now? Presenting the painting for no reason, giving the crown prince a favor. I raised my hand and clinked glasses. Your gift is even more precious. I just saw that those 2 horses are worth 10,000 gold. Akultek horses are rare in the world, especially those transported from the northern frontier to the capital. I don't know how much effort and manpower it took. Hearing this, Li Xuange narrowed his eyes, drained his glass, and changed the subject. I'll take you home after the banquet. I nodded. Chui Song and Yang Hung left in a hurry, so they probably wouldn't leave a carriage for me. Above, the emperor stood up and left his seat. After taking only a few steps, he suddenly fell backward into his chair, his eyes wide open, unable to speak, as if he had suffered a stroke. The entire hall was in chaos. The crown prince carried the emperor away in a hurry, and fourth sister followed. The city gates inside the palace were locked, and the hall doors were closed. Several dozen people attending the banquet, apart from the imperial family and relatives, were all important officials. All were locked inside the hall. Guards led doctors in to examine each dish, search clothing and people, and searched all night. No one was allowed to rest, but in the end, they found nothing. By noon the next day, everyone had to register and leave fingerprints before being released. The palace gate was filled with carriages from various residences coming to pick them up. Li Xuange draped a cloak over my shoulders, gently supporting me, and invited me into his carriage. I was about to follow when someone called me back. Madame Chui. Li Xuange and I took a moment to react, remembering that was how the Chui family servants called me. The Chui residence's carriage was parked very close to the palace gate, probably waiting since last night. I turned around and got into the Chui residence's carriage. I thought the inside of the carriage was empty, but Chui Song was sitting there, all alone. Sir. Chui Song stared at me. Let's go out for some air. I sat close to the carriage door, not saying a word during the entire journey, exhausted but unable to sleep peacefully. The emperor was seriously ill and unable to rise. The crown prince was attending to him day and night. The political affairs were temporarily handled by Prince Xian and others, but they were almost at a standstill. The world was about to change, and even the Chui residence was about to change. News of Yang Heng's pregnancy reached the southwest. The Duke of Xing secretly reorganized his army, preparing to enter the capital to punish the crown prince. Chui Song had to meet with many people every day, the Yang family, the Chui family, the Song family, but he never visited Yang Hung. She waited pregnant for half a day outside the corridor, only to receive a few perfunctory words and return. Zhao Mi, I sit by the window and drop food for the red parrot. Chui Song stood at the corridor door, not knowing how long he had been watching. This one is just like the one you presented to the palace. At this point, Chui Song no longer rejected the female lead as before, so I changed the way he addressed her to match the later plot. I paused. Blood-red parrots are born in pairs, but raising 2 at the same time is a bad omen, so I only presented one to the palace. Chui Song didn't pay much attention. Hasn't the Ming family's fortune-telling ever been wrong? Out of respect for Yang Heng, I took the trouble to point it out. Have you ever heard of my father predicting the big fire in the eastern city? Chui Song had heard of it. Once a prediction is made, it becomes part of the karma. The more people try to avoid it, the easier it is to fall deeper. But in the end, only the human heart can determine fate. I put down the silver spoon, turned to look at him, my voice full of hidden meaning. Chui Song sat down as if thinking. You mean I should ignore everything, but the current court situation is as tense as a bowstring. It's hard to avoid being a bystander. You can resign, take Yang Heng and her mother back to the southwest, give birth to the baby, and hand it over to the Duke of Xing, while the two of you go into seclusion. He sat there in silence for a long time. It gradually darkened, and lights were lit in the courtyard. Chui Song wanted to stay overnight again. Seeing a Heng always makes me tired. With you, I feel a little more at ease. I quietly looked at him, curling my lips into a smile, finding it only laughable. Chui Song saw me smile, also smiled softly, glancing around the room, admiring the small bed near the window. I'll sleep there then. As you wish, I pointed towards the window in front of the parrot cage. Don't close the window, I don't like sleeping with the windows closed. In the past few months, Chui Song had stayed at my place 7 or 8 times, to the point that even when I went to visit Yang Heng, she refused to see me. All the servants around her were also secretly talking about me. I stopped going, letting her rest. It was difficult to say who was right or wrong. When Chui Song made that decision, Yang Heng and I could no longer be friends because she loved him. The night was as dark as ink. I heard a strange noise from the bed, got up, walked past the sleeping Chui Song, and opened the window. A small shadow darted past, and the parrot perched on the frame, its shadow swaying on the window. I was about to return to bed when, in the middle of the night, the parrot suddenly called urgently, "Rebellious son." My whole body turned cold. The parrot called again, "Stepfather killer." I couldn't stand steady for a moment, taking 2 steps back. Through the blood-red eyes of the parrot, it was as if I saw that scene, crossing the dark city, flying into the palace corridor, perching on the frame outside the window. The shadow of the bird in the light was printed on the longevity screen, stretching out to the curtain, but no one noticed, because on the screen were printed the shadows of 2 people, one holding the other's chin, the other pouring something into the mouth. In the darkness, there were hands around my shoulders. I was shocked, biting my finger hard to keep from screaming. "It's me, don't be afraid." Chui Song was also awake. He still held my shoulders, looking out the open window, then looking at the blood-red parrot. "Rebellious son, stepfather killer, I don't know where it learned that from." Chui Song repeated, his expression calm, but his eyes suddenly deepened. I also calmed down. The crown prince had already made his move. The succession was only a matter of days. Early in the morning, at Mao hour, the city gates had just opened, and there were few people on the streets. I'm seeing Li Xuange off as he disguises himself to leave the capital. Remember to be careful on the road. I took a good luck charm and placed it in his hand. I didn't know when we would meet again on this trip. I embroidered this charm for you. You should also leave me a token. Li Xuange looked at me, his eyes deep, clutching the good luck charm in his hand. "Wen Shu, the situation in the capital is dangerous. Come back to the northern frontier with me. If I ascend the throne, I'll make you empress." I resolutely shook my head. I can't go. My family is all in the capital, and so is yours." He pursed his lips, sighed softly, and looked down around himself. "I don't have any tokens or—" I gently pulled his sleeve. When your father brought the northern frontier horses into the capital for the birthday celebration last time, the road was long. I guess your people are still stationed outside the city, not all withdrawn. Give me a token for self-defense." Li Xuange was stunned. "So I'm going back alone? Then remember to be careful." Li Xuange looked up at me, hesitating silently for a moment, then put the good luck charm in his chest and gave me the Li family token. "It's only 1,000 people anyway, all for you." He hugged me tightly. "Ming Wen Shu, wait for me to return. If anyone wants to kill you, Tell him to come find me. I'll redeem you. My hand moved slightly, also gently hugging him back. You will be safe. When I returned to the residence, there were unusually people in Yang Hang's courtyard. It was said that Chui Song had gone to see her. I was going to go back and rest, but I thought about it and something felt wrong. I stormed straight into Yang Hang's courtyard, pushing all the maids out, and saw Chui Song feeding her medicine. I stepped forward, knocking the bowl of medicine to the ground, shattering it. Chui Song's expression changed slightly. Yang Heng propped herself up on the edge of the bed, looking at the broken pieces, her eyes changing from surprise to emptiness. Chui Song stood up, telling the maids to clean it up, glanced at me, and turned to leave. Yang Heng lay down. Heng, I have to send this message to the Duke of Xing. Please go. She pulled up the blanket, turning away. I couldn't wake someone who was pretending to sleep, let alone wake a pregnant woman who was pretending to sleep. She was beautiful, weak, and carrying a new life. Simply holding the blanket tightly was enough to withstand all the wind and snow. As autumn arrived, the wind in the capital was sharper. The news of Li Shuanga leaving ahead of schedule was also revealed. I no longer had time to linger by Yang Heng's side, so I had to withdraw some experts from Li Shuanga's people to install in the Chui residence. I was worried that something would happen to her. From the first time I met her 6 years ago, I had seen the great disaster of the Chui residence burning. She was 6 months pregnant, writing a suicide note right in front of me, then breathed her last. That letter was sent to the Duke of Xing. I guessed it was a letter of help. Since the birthday celebration, the emperor had never appeared again. Although the crown prince had not obtained the tiger tally of the imperial guard, he had reconciled with Prince Xian, and his power was even more secure. If there was still a hidden danger, it was only the Li family in the northern frontier and the Yang family in the southwest. Chui Song secretly surrendered to the crown prince. He didn't need Yang Heng's child, which meant he didn't want the Duke of Xing to enter the capital, but Yang Heng didn't know what to think, slowly not sending a message to her father, leaving the Duke of Xing still unaware of his son-in-law's intentions. That day, Yang Heng actively came to find me, wanting to borrow Consort Chui's jade lock. That's the late consort's relic. I believe it's currently stored at your place. She didn't say anything else, only sat for a while before standing up. Before leaving, she looked at the parrot in the living room. You also raised this? I almost forgot that she was originally from the southwest. That night, I told Chui Song about the jade lock. Did you lend it to her? Not yet. I happened to bring it to the jade craftsman to polish a few days ago. Chui Song again mentioned that the Duke of Xing once had a bold idea, building Yang Heng's identity into the little princess who died young years ago. How can that be done? That princess was born dead, she wasn't lost. Chui Song rubbed his forehead and sighed. But there's one strange point that can be exploited. 15 years ago, the newborn princess had no breath or heartbeat, but her whole body was still warm, not cold at all. The emperor summoned all the doctors all night, but there was no way to save her. At that time, Consort Chui was favored and didn't believe the princess was dead, holding the child for 3 nights, but the princess still closed her eyes and didn't cry. On the 4th day, the emperor insisted on burial. Consort Chui knelt down and begged for a water burial, using a sandalwood bowl engraved with phoenix tails, with small holes drilled in the bottom to let the water seep in. It was released on the big river, drifted far away, and then sank. The water burial of the princess was a secret in the palace, but there were a few people who witnessed it at that time: the emperor, the empress, the Prince Xian, the Duke of Xing, Lady Tang, and I all witnessed it firsthand. Chui Song squinted, lost in thought. Only half a day passed before the princess was submerged. There's no chance she's still alive. The Duke of Xing is just indulging in wishful thinking, hoping to secure a future for his grandson. I lowered my head and poured more tea. I, on the other hand, think the Duke of Xing is quite clever to have conceived such a plan. Chui Song tilted his head to look at me, then suddenly placed his hand on the back of my hand. Li Xiange ran away. Why didn't you take her with you? I frowned slightly, pulling my hand away and inadvertently spilled hot tea on his hand. Chui Song shot up, clutching his hand, and stared at me silently. I said apologetically, "Please, my lord, don't bring up my heartbreak." Chui Song looked down at Yang Hung from above. "Ah Hung, are you aware that the Duke of Xing was attacked and his condition is unknown?" Yang Hung stared directly into his eyes for a long time, then slowly reached out, wanting to touch him. "Ziheng," she choked out. I interjected with feigned curiosity. "Ziheng." Chui Song tilted his head to look at me, his eyes slightly lowered. "It's my style name." I glanced at Yang Hung. She closed her eyes, leaned back against the wall, and sighed deeply. "Father, I'm not dead yet." "Calculate it yourself." I gently tugged at the hem of Chui Song's robe. "My lord, if the Duke of Xing knew how we were treating his daughter, we'd both suffer a terrible death." Chui Song frowned, stepped back slightly, and scanned the room. "Who are these people?" "They're the compensation that Li Xiange, that scoundrel who abandoned me, owes you," I said in a plaintive voice, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "How about we leave Yang Hung here? My lord, could we elope together?" Everyone around us fell silent, looking at each other in astonishment. Chui Song listened, his eyes slightly lowered, his expression blank. He pushed my hand away, grabbed the lamp from the table, went straight into the inner room, and poured the oil on the bed curtains. The flames quickly erupted fiercely. I was also stunned, indifferent to the Duke of Xing venting all this blood feud on the crown prince's head. Chui Song grabbed my hand tightly and pulled me out. Yang Hung gritted her teeth and endured the pain, her fingernails scratching at the wall, trying to stand up, but time and again, she couldn't manage to stay upright. "Chui Song, have you gone mad? Isn't this your child?" "It's your child." She lost all reason, crying and cursing, her voice choked with sobs. "Have you forgotten? Have you forgotten everything? You proposed marriage yourself after meeting me only once." I turned my head to look at her. "My lord, she's still a Hung after all. How can you let her die such a painful death?" Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. The Empress, Prince Xian, the Duke of Xing, Lady Tang, and we were all there, witnessing it with our own eyes. Chui Song, his brow furrowed in concentration, seemed to be sifting through his memories. Barely half a day had passed, and the princess had already sunk beneath the surface. It's impossible for her to still be alive. The Duke of Xing is just letting his hopes run wild, dreaming of securing a future for his grandson. I quietly refilled his teacup, offering a contrasting opinion. Personally, I find the Duke of Xing's thinking rather ingenious. He's a clever man to have even come up with such a plan. Chui Song cocked his head, his gaze shifting to me. Then, unexpectedly, he placed his hand on the back of my own. Li Xiange made his escape. "Why didn't you bring her along with you?" My brow furrowed ever so slightly, a subtle sign of my displeasure. I withdrew my hand, a bit too quickly, and inadvertently spilled the scalding tea onto his hand. Chui Song recoiled, leaping to his feet, clutching his hand in obvious discomfort, and staring at me speechless. I hastened to apologize, a touch of remorse in my voice. "Please, my lord, I beg you, don't bring up such a painful subject for me." Chui Song, towering over Yang Hung, fixed her with a piercing gaze. "Ah Hung, are you aware that the Duke of Xing was ambushed and his current condition is uncertain, perhaps even dire?" Yang Hung met his gaze, holding it for what felt like an eternity. Then, with agonizing slowness, she reached out her hand, as if longing to touch him. "Ziheng," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat, unable to complete the sentence. I, feigning curiosity, jumped into the silence. "Ziheng." Chui Song turned his head to acknowledge me, his eyes momentarily dropping, almost bashfully. "It's my courtesy name," he explained. I cast a sideways glance at Yang Hung. She closed her eyes, leaned heavily against the wall, and released a long, weary sigh. "Father," she said, addressing Chui Song, "I'm not dead yet. So, please, do your calculations yourself." I delicately tugged at the edge of Chui Song's robe, attempting to steer the conversation. "My lord," I whispered urgently, "if the Duke of Xing were to discover how we're treating his daughter, the consequences would be dire. We would both suffer a most gruesome end." Chui Song frowned, his expression darkening. He took a half step back, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the scene. Just who are these people? He demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. They're the compensation, I began, my voice dripping with resentment. The compensation that Li Xiango, that heartless scoundrel who abandoned me, owes you, I finished, softening my tone, looking up at him with pleading eyes, hoping to sway him. Tell me, what if we were to leave Yang Heng here? My lord, might we consider eloping together, just the two of us? An uncomfortable silence descended upon the room. Everyone present exchanged shocked glances. Chui Song listened to my proposition, his eyes veiled, his face an impassive mask. Without a word, he brushed my hand aside, seized the oil lamp from the table, and strode purposefully into the inner chamber. There, he proceeded to douse the bed curtains with the lamp's contents. In an instant, the flames erupted with a terrifying ferocity. I stood there, paralyzed with shock, completely indifferent to the fact that the Duke of Xing would undoubtedly seek to avenge this act of betrayal upon the crown prince's head. Chui Song, his face grim, seized my hand and dragged me towards the exit. Yang Heng, her face contorted in pain, gritted her teeth and clawed at the wall, desperate to find purchase. She tried, again and again, to pull herself to her feet, but her strength failed her, and she remained slumped against the wall. Chui Song, have you completely lost your mind? She screamed, her voice cracking with anguish. Isn't this your child? This is your own flesh and blood. She dissolved into a torrent of tears and accusations, her voice thick with emotion. Have you forgotten? Have you forgotten everything? You came to me yourself, begging to propose marriage after only a single meeting. I turned back to look at her, a flicker of something akin to pity in my eyes. My lord, I said, addressing Chui Song, she is still a Heng after all. How can you simply condemn her to such a painful and agonizing death? Thank you so much for lending your ears to this tale. If you found it captivating, please show your support by giving it a like, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel for more stories. I placed the sword hilt in his hand. Thoi Tong paused, taking a deep breath, his chest rising and falling. It was just as she said. He drew the sword from its sheath, turned, and resolved to grant Diung Heng a swift death. Heng, don't be afraid, I'm here. Diung Heng gritted her teeth, her eyes blazing with hatred as she stared at Thoi Tong. Thoi Tong, I'll be waiting for you in the underworld. I quietly watched his retreating figure, hastily wrapping the hem of my garment around the bleeding wound on my hand, bending down to pick up the abandoned sword from the ground. Finally, this moment had arrived. Just as Thoi Tong was about to swing his sword, the blade stopped in midair. He looked down in surprise, a stream of hot blood trickling out, soaking his clothes. The tip of my sword had pierced through his chest, the blood not yet staining the cold steel. I mustered all my strength and yanked the sword out. Thoi Tong fell backward, his heavy body collapsing at my feet, his eyes wide open, staring at me unblinking. It's her. He looked up, blood gushing from his mouth, staining his face red. She deceived me. I looked down at him, my expression cold. Enough talk, Grandmaster Thoi, I've put up with you for far too long. Thinking of fourth sister, fearing something might happen, I added another stab to his throat. I half knelt on the ground, glancing at Diung Heng, a slight smirk on my face. No need to wait below, I'm sending him to you now. Now you have two choices. One is that you want to avenge him, and I'll send you to the underworld to reunite. Or two, you thank me for saving your life, and I'll take you away from this eerie place. Diung Heng supported herself on the ground, her eyes wide with shock as she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. She gently closed her eyes, hot tears rolling down her cheeks. Van Thursday, I'm sorry, I can't hold on any longer. She sat down heavily, blood constantly flowing from her body, soaking the back of her clothes. I hurriedly helped her up, my eyes darting around the room engulfed in flames, trying to find a temporary place for her to lie down. Diung Heng gripped my hand tightly, each word broken and fragmented. I gave you this favor, I must also give you one. I will write A final letter to my father, asking him to adopt you as his goddaughter from now on. The thin Kwoktsung mansion will protect you. The flickering flames painted the night sky red as she strained her last bit of strength, leaning against the edge of the table, trembling as she wrote her last will and testament. After writing it, she carefully tucked the letter into my hand and took off her honey yellow beeswax jade bracelet, the one I first saw her wearing when I met her last year. Wear this bracelet, take the letter to the calligraphy and painting shop that I frequent, and give it to the shopkeeper. I held the letter tightly in my hand, my eyes a little moist, choking with emotion. I will have someone carry you outside. Dyung Hang grabbed my hand, looked down at her stomach, her eyes pleading, begging. Van Thursday, help me. Has the emperor passed away and announced it to the world? The Prince Xian led the clan members to enter the mourning palace, but was blocked by the crown prince's imperial guards and placed under house arrest in the Qian Tui Palace. In one night, the sound of galloping horses echoed through every corner of the capital, and the mansions of the high-ranking officials were surrounded by imperial guards. When everything happened, I was behind the Bok Van Temple outside the capital, having bought a small, dilapidated courtyard to temporarily hide, and for 3 consecutive days, I distributed porridge and rice to the hungry beggars. The day I fled the Thoi mansion, Thoi Tong and Dyung Hang died in the sea of fire. True Triad arrived 1 step late and set fire to the entire Thoi mansion, accusing me of plotting to harm the Thoi couple, setting fire to silence them, and then fleeing without a trace. Fortunately, I had Dyung Hang's final letter and secretly contacted the Thin Kwoktsung. The Thin Kwoktsung, Dyung Thieu, publicly recognized me as his goddaughter, causing an uproar. I guess that Thoi Tong had just died, and the crown prince must be like a frightened bird, eager to ascend to the throne. But to mobilize the imperial guards, one must have the tiger seal, which was originally in the hands of the Prince Xian, so how did it fall into the hands of True Triad? I thought of someone who gave me a headache. My subordinate advised me to find Lai Huinxie, Madam, while the crown prince is busy dealing with matters in the palace. We can leave the capital and return to the northern border and join forces with the general. I glanced at him sideways, saying nothing. That night, I gathered everyone in the courtyard and spread the rice paper in a long line on the table. You have been through life and death with me, and you are all my lifesavers, but now I am not going to the northern border. The capital is dangerous, and life and death are unpredictable. Anyone who wants to leave and find Lai Huinxie can go on their own, and I will write a letter telling him not to blame you. Everyone looked at each other. After a stick of incense had burned, nearly a third of the people quietly left. The bright moonlight poured down like water as I slowly ground the ink, my voice calm. As for those who remain, Thoi Tong is dead. If the Lai family ascends the throne, I will be a concubine. If the Dyung family ascends the throne, I will be an adopted princess. If the crown prince or the Prince Xian ascends the throne, I will also be a brother-in-law. I raised my head and looked directly into everyone's eyes. Whoever wants to follow Min Van Thursday from now on will no longer call me madam, but master. Whoever wants to take advantage of the chaos to seize power, write your name, hometown, and parents, wives, and children on this paper. If I am alive, I will reward you according to your merits. If you die, I will repay your family. Not long after, the first person stepped forward to write his name, and then the crowd flocked to sign their names. There were still 4 or 5 people standing motionless in the corner of the courtyard, their faces hesitant and uncertain. I went into the room and took out some loose silver and gave it to them. This is some silver, share it among yourselves and leave the mountain. If you don't want to go back to the northern border and don't want to follow me, you must miss your family, so go home. Fame and wealth may not be more important than parents, wives, and children. They trembled as they took the silver, thanked me, and quietly left. But there was one person who was completely different. I wanted to take the money and sign my name at the same time. Is that okay? I looked at him, scrutinizing him. Coarse cloth clothes, neatly tied hair, ordinary face, and a steady voice. I remembered him. He was the one who kicked away Dyung Hang's sword when she stabbed me. What's your name? Laimuk. His mother was seriously ill, and he wanted to go home to see his mother, but he needed money for medical treatment. If I gave him money, he would be willing to follow me. It's okay, but that's not fair. I pointed to the group of people who were writing their names. If I give you money, how will they be convinced? Laimuk nodded, said yes, and then turned to leave. I quickly called him back, unless you help me with something, and you will be rewarded handsomely after it's done. 3 days later, Laimuk led a cart of grass to the gate of the courtyard. I turned over the pile of grass to see what was inside. Min Vong Swan crawled out of the pile of grass, still wearing coarse cloth clothes, her hair disheveled, her eyes red as she looked at me. Van Thursday, is that really you? I brushed off the blades of grass stuck to her hair. Consort Xian, I also guessed it was you. You were the one who gave the tiger seal of the Imperial Guards to True Triet. I thought about how the Crown Prince once said that he spared my life out of consideration for my 3 sisters, so I knew that eldest sister must have made a mistake, but I didn't expect it to be this mistake. He used documents to threaten you, and you had to compromise. Min Vong Swan got out of the car and stood in the pile of messy grass. Min Van Ha sat huddled in a corner, her eyes empty, not saying a word. Eldest sister choked up and said that on the Emperor's birthday, I said that I hadn't seen Van Ha for several months. Not long after, True Triet let me see her, and she had become like this. I took her pulse and found that there was nothing wrong with her body. Van Ha suffered from aphasia, probably because of the spring before, when True Triet took her to see hundreds of people who read fortunes. Reading fortunes too much brought misfortune upon herself, and she would get better after a period of recuperation. I knew, but True Triet cut off her food and forced me to hand over the tiger seal in exchange for her, and I could only betray True Min Thua. That night, I received a letter from Thin Quoc Som, saying that he would arrive in the capital in 10 days. I sat in the courtyard rocking the cradle, teasing the baby. Great-grandfather, you're coming to pick me up, aren't you happy? Min Vong Swan came out of the door. She wanted to enter the palace to save the Prince Xian. I had a hard time rescuing you from the Prince Xian's mansion, and now you want to go back to the palace to die. Troops from all over are rushing to the capital. You might as well go to the Prince Xian's fiefdom of Feng Yanlang to ask for reinforcements. You are the Prince Xian's consort, and you will definitely be able to get some troops. She hesitated, but before entering the palace, True Min Thua told me not to act rashly. I smiled faintly. How would he know that you had stolen the tiger seal? Min Vong Swan choked and glared at me. Then she saw the cradle next to her and quickly bent down to pick up the baby. This is your child, so I have a grandson. I helplessly looked at her. Her eyes were full of love, gently holding the baby. It looked more like Thoi Tong than like me. A sister held the child in her arms, pondered, and nodded in agreement to go to Yen Lang, saying that if anything happened to him, she could still snatch him out. I stood up immediately. I will have someone escort you. She was stunned as she looked at me. Van Thursday, I didn't expect you to be so gentle after becoming a mother. I paused, narrowed my eyes, and looked at her and the child. After Deung Hang's matter, I understood that everyone has their own reasons, and one cannot arbitrarily judge them. Sister, I have something to ask of you. I took the baby in my arms, lowered my voice, and said, actually, this is my child with Lai Huinxie. I didn't intentionally kill Thoi Tong, but because the matter was exposed, he intended to kill the child and accidentally fell on my sword. In the chaos, he set fire to the house himself and Deung Hang died unjustly. Min Vong Swan was shocked, horrified. I knelt down holding my child, asking you to take the baby back to Yanlang to secretly raise him. When the world is at peace, I will come to pick him up. Min Vong Swan set off, and I left only more than 500 people with me, except for Lai Muk. The rest went to escort her. What about you? She stood on the car, and I looked down at the baby. You just need to protect the baby well. If he dies, I don't want to live either. She was touched and raised her hand to swear. Have you named him yet? Min Tru, you are my hope for tomorrow. After eldest sister left, I took second sister to Bok Van Temple to recuperate, locked the courtyard, and then walked to the palace gate alone. I wanted to see True Triet. At that time, True Triet was in a state of chaos. The Thin Quoc Song's 30,000 troops were pressing towards the capital from the east. Lai Huinsie's 50,000 vanguard troops from the north were also advancing south, about to cross the Yangtze River. In the capital, after Thoi Tong's death, the civil and military officials held their breaths and the entire court was silent. Only in the palace, the clan members led by Tru Minh Thua, who had been imprisoned for many days, still refused to cooperate with the crown prince. Tru Minh Thua insisted on seeing the remains of the late emperor with his own eyes. True Triet summoned me for an audience. Min Van Thursday, I was just about to look for you, but I didn't expect you to come here on your own. I raised my head, calmly looking at him, and said, I once swore in the secret room that if your highness succeeds, I would be willing to serve you. True Triet slowly stepped down the steps, his voice somewhat sarcastic, mocking. Really? What a coincidence. You are both the goddaughter of Thin Quoc Song and the beloved of Lai Huinsie. What if I take you as a hostage? I raised my eyebrows slightly, smiling faintly, and said, Your Highness, have you ever seen a dynasty where hostages on the city walls are really useful? Don't say that I am just a goddaughter or a lover. Even if I am the biological father of Dung Thieu or the biological mother of Lai Huinsie, I am afraid that even if you push me down the city, it won't stir up any dust, but only make the other party more motivated. True Triet's face suddenly darkened, revealing a look of displeasure. Then what use are you? I took 2 steps forward, straightening my face and said seriously, I can help your highness persuade Prince Yen to come out and support you. You will help me? He looked at me warily, scrutinizing me. I smiled, Your Highness, I have never harmed anyone. In fact, I came to the palace to see Tru Minh Thua. The others were imprisoned in Kien Tui Palace, only he was locked up in the prison, a dark and damp place. Tru Minh Thua only glanced at me out of the corner of his eye, coldly. Unless you let me see the remains of the late emperor with my own eyes, don't expect me to support True Triet's ascension to the throne. I waved my hand for the servants to step back and sat opposite him, slowly saying, Brother-in-law, don't you just want to know if the crown prince really forced the emperor to commit suicide? He looked up at me slightly, questioning. If you want to see, I can take you. I deliberately paused, my eyes meeting his directly. No need to see, I'll tell you straight, he did it. Tru Minh Thua clenched his fists and punched the prison wall hard, angrily. Then you still want to persuade me for him? I sighed softly, still calmly. But I'm not persuading you for him, I'm persuading you for myself. He was stunned, confused. You? What are you relying on? I didn't look at him, and continued to speak, my voice slow. Brother-in-law, if you continue to procrastinate with True Triet, this country will sooner or later fall into the hands of the Dung family or the Lai family. If you don't want to choose True Triet, then choose me. I have the Thin Quoc Song mansion as my backing. Before I finished speaking, Tru Minh Thua's face had turned pale, and he shouted angrily. Enough, absurd. Even without True Triet, there are still so many members of the clan. Are they all dead? And you are just a nominal goddaughter. How can you shake the world? Go back, I had already foreseen this outcome. I am not good at using sweet words to persuade anyone. Then let me tell you, if you don't choose me, then what will happen? You want to prolong the time, forcing True Triet to make you the heir in exchange for your support, so you are waiting. Waiting for True Triet to be forced to the point of desperation, you will have to beg him. Tru Minh Thua calmly said nothing, keeping a cold expression. I raised my head, sighing faintly. But you won't be able to wait. As soon as I step out of here, True Triet will hear that the Yanlang troops have been mobilized, and the army carrying your banner is advancing directly towards the capital. If you were True Triet, would you dare to believe that it was just to force you to establish an heir? He frowned, his face worried. Yanlang has never had my decree. How dare they mobilize troops without permission? I didn't answer, but slowly said, You are imprisoned in this place, so you don't know. Thin Quoc Song will arrive in a few days, and Lai Huinsie will also enter the capital after winning the battle. It's a pity that the Yanlang troops are behind. By the time they arrive, the new emperor will have already ascended the throne, so it will be in vain and they will lose their lives. Tru Minh Thua suddenly woke up, realizing that it was Min Vong Xuan. This woman, what did you say to persuade her? I told her that only by doing so could she save you. I smiled at him. I wasn't lying. At this moment, that was really the only way to save you. Truman Thua was silent for a long time and then said coldly, "Even if I agree to help you, who will approve? You are not a member of the royal family, and you're a woman. How can you claim the title of emperor?" I took out the jade pendant left by Thoi consort and raised it up. "Who said I am not a member of the royal family? Brother-in-law, look, am I not exactly like the princess who was lost among the people in the past?" Truman Thua narrowed his eyes, intending to reach out and snatch it, but I gently stepped back to avoid it. "To tell you the truth, this is also Thin Quoc Song's idea. Isn't my royal identity already established?" I gently stroked the jade pendant, raised my head and looked at him. "Brother-in-law, when the little princess was set adrift on the river that year, the only witnesses were you and Thin Quoc Song, and the late emperor, the late empress, Thoi consort, and Thoi Tong have all passed away." I paused, my voice stern. "I am now a widow, with no husband and no children. I only seek to be a female emperor for one lifetime, and later I will leave a decree, allowing you to choose one of the clan members to succeed me, and after I pass away, I will return the country to the true family." Truman Thua's eyes flickered slightly, and his voice also became more serious. "Min Van Thursday, even if I agree, will Thin Quoc Song dare to put you on the throne? Will True Tribe believe in this fabricated identity? If just one person doesn't agree, then everything will just be a joke." I put the jade pendant into my sleeve, smiled faintly, and said, "Brother-in-law, what I have said is enough. When the crown prince ascends the throne, I am afraid it won't be peaceful. You just need to come out and recognize me as the little princess of the past, and stand up to support me as emperor, and you don't need to worry about the rest. Whether I succeed or fail, as long as you do that, I will also make eldest sister stop mobilizing the Yanlang troops." Last night, I left the city to meet Deung Thieu. I took out the bracelet that Deung Heng had given me before her death, and told him the story of her death from beginning to end. That night, I could have taken her out of the Thoi mansion, but the 7-month-old fetus in her belly had a miscarriage. Aheng said that she had misjudged the person, and that everything she had done was a disgrace to her father, so she would rather die than keep the child. Deung Thieu sat silently in the tent, his hands trembling as he held the bracelet tightly, old tears streaming down his face, his voice hoarse. "She has always been a good daughter." After a long time, he wiped his tears and took a deep breath. "So, what happened to the child now?" I gently raised the teacup to my mouth, blowing lightly. "It's a boy named Min Tru. Deung Min Tru. Adoptive father, please rest assured. I have taken him to a safe place. No one in this world can find him, and even more, no one dares to touch him." I glanced at the crowd in the tent and gave Deung Thieu a meaningful look. He understood, his face turning cold, and waved his hand to order, "All of you step back." Waiting until there were only 2 people left in the tent, I slowly said, "Adoptive father, I have heard all your worries, but the world is impermanent. Adoptive father is now over 70 years old. Even if you sit on the throne, how many more years can you keep it? Today, it wasn't you who called me here, but I came on my own initiative." I took a sip of tea, my voice hoarse. "Adoptive daughter, even though I can't compare to your own flesh and blood, but your own daughter is already gone, so adoptive daughter should be closer by a fraction. Adoptive father, why don't you consider giving the throne to me? I am an orphan, and I am willing to honor you as my royal father. Later, when you are 100 years old and return to heaven, I will posthumously confer you as emperor, which can also be regarded as fulfilling your wish." Deung Thieu pondered for a moment, his voice indifferent. "Suppose I don't agree, then what?" I sighed softly. "Then Aheng's son will no longer be of any use. Adoptive father can temporarily fulfill his wish to be emperor, but let me ask, who will you choose to succeed you? The country. It's nothing like a family inheritance, where fathers pass down to sons, sons betray fathers, brothers kill each other, and husbands and wives turn on one another. Who can be sure that an adopted child will be better than a grandchild who carries the bloodline? As I stepped out of the tent, I was suddenly blocked by swords and spears, forcing me to retreat 2 steps. I was startled, but Gu Shinjing raised his voice and shouted, "Adoptive father, have you thought it through? Wouldn't it be better to enjoy your old age surrounded by your grandchildren? That child is the direct descendant that Ahung risked her life to save for you." Yang Xiao suddenly clenched his teacup, gritted his teeth, pressed his hand on the broken porcelain, and coldly shouted, "Let her go." Under the words of the Duke of Xing, the eyes of the officials all turned to the wise king. Zhao Mingqing sighed softly. "The little princess of that year, I fear her life or death is still unknown." Recalling those 10 years ago, his eyes were somewhat dreamy. That day, from afar, I saw a wooden boat with phoenix tails floating on the river. As it was about to sink completely, it was suddenly tilted by a wave, and an infant in swaddling clothes fell into the water. We were about to leave, but faintly saw the child raising its hand for help, as if choked by water and awakened, but we couldn't see clearly. At that time, Consort Chui said she heard crying and ordered people to follow the riverbank and search for dozens of miles. Yang Xiao continued, "After that, the late emperor ordered a search for 3 months, but the princess's body was never found." Zhao felt stunned upon hearing that. "She's still alive? My mother said she must have drowned. Even if she were alive, how could she be Min Shu?" Hearing that, my heart also trembled slightly. Zhao Mingqing regained his senses and slowly said, "I fear Consort Chui recognized Shu, so before her death, she gave her the jade lock that was meant for the princess." Zhao tightened his grip on the sword, staring at the wise king and the Duke of Xing, and asked with a trembling voice, "You guys?" I leaned back slightly, whispered into his ear, "Your Highness, you and fourth sister joined forces to harm the late emperor, and now she's turning around to bite you. Your path to survival is cut off. If you kill me, you will surely die. Only she will benefit." Moreover, outside, the Duke of Xing with 30,000 elite troops has closed in on the city. Consider it carefully. My eyes coldly glanced at him. "At least I can save your life." Fourth sister stepped forward in front of the Duke of Xing, and the wise king raised her head high, her eyes revealing a clear look of triumph, and shouted directly at us. "Zhao, you dared to poison the late emperor, and even had the audacity to try to silence me. Your heinous crimes are unforgivable. Even if you hold my sister hostage, I was deeply loved by the late emperor. He will definitely not spare you." Hearing that, Zhao's face turned purple with anger, his whole body trembling, grinding his teeth. He pushed me forward and threw his sword on the ground violently. He stepped forward empty-handed in front of the officials and loudly defended himself. "I swear I never plotted against my father, and I am willing to be investigated, but I absolutely cannot let an ungrateful person like you judge me." He pointed directly at fourth sister, his tone full of contempt. "You have no status. Who knows whose child is in your belly?" He looked up at everyone, laughed coldly, and continued, "Don't forget this Madame Ming was once married. Perhaps that child is even Li Xuange's." Ming Zedong was extremely horrified, her anger surging, her whole body trembling violently. She grabbed Zhao's collar, her mouth tightly pursed until it bled, and hissed each word, Why don't you just die?" Zhao pushed her hand away, calmly adjusted his collar, and smiled indifferently. At this point, he and Ming Zedong had officially broken off. One accused of harming the emperor, one pregnant with suspicion. Neither had the right to dream of that throne. Then there's only me left. The wise king and the Duke of Xing gently pushed me onto the throne without shedding a drop of blood. On the spot, I issued an imperial decree imprisoning the former crown prince Zhao in the East Palace, not until the truth is investigated, not until a conclusion is reached. As for Ming Zedong, temporarily leave her in the palace to raise her child, wait until she gives birth, and then discuss the matter later. The late emperor was taken back to the imperial mausoleum for burial. After he was gone, I sat alone on the dragon throne, holding the jade lock in my hand, and a sorrow welled up in my heart. Li Mu broke my train of thought. "Master," he hesitated for a moment and continued, "the general sent another letter." He paused for a moment, You kept asking me to send false messages to slow down his army's advance. Now he heard the news that you were in danger. Li Xuanga sent a letter of severance. The handwriting was scribbled, full of anger. Now hearing that I ascended the throne, he thought I was plotting cunningly, deceiving him like a dog. So pleased with myself, I must have forgotten him long ago. From now on, we will only see each other with swords and spears. He doesn't trust me anymore. To put it bluntly, he congratulated me on my successful scheming while he was being played by me. From now on, meeting each other means swords and spears. I read it over and over again, then slowly picked up my pen and replied, "My husband." Li Mu looked at those two words and coughed softly, stammering, I'll stare. He quickly bowed his head and stepped back. I'll continue writing. My husband, why let others' words turn me into a criminal? Since parting, I've been missing you day and night, unable to eat or sleep, and you have become haggard too. They keep deceiving and humiliating me. I had no choice. Now in the capital, I have cleared all obstacles for you, hoping for an early reunion. I cut a lock of hair, tied it with a red thread, and sent it with the letter. Li Mu received the letter and hesitated to ask, will it work? Let's see. 3 days later, Li Xuanga replied. I opened it. There was no letter inside, only a lock of hair fell out, quietly lying in my hand. Hair tied, we never doubt each other. Li Mu saw it and smiled softly. It worked. Years ago, my father predicted that there would be 4 people in the world with the destiny of an emperor. Now Cui Song is dead, the crown prince is imprisoned, the wise king submits to me, only Li Xuanga is left. I stood on the city wall, looking out over the magnificent capital, as if returning to that night. When my father gathered us 3 sisters, he wanted to change our fate with magic. This must be done with enough intimacy. The 3 of you should marry 3 of them, follow their hearts, and then use magic to change fate, to turn the world around. Second sister frowned. Father, there's still 1 person missing, so we can only take a gamble. Indeed, as my father predicted. The 4 of us married 3, and today only 1 is left. That night, after second sister and fourth sister left, only I remained, and my father said a lot to me. His voice still echoed in my ears. Washu, Wanchun is gentle and yielding, Wenxia is stubborn and easily broken only. In the middle of the night, he stood under the corridor, looking up at the full moon, his robe gently swaying in the wind. This gamble is placed on you, your fate. The 7 killings Shaoshan governs seizing. You only need to stay with someone long enough, and you will unconsciously seize their destiny. 7 killings Shaoshan, inclined to seize fate, wind rises, opportunities flutter. Li Xuanga's army is about to enter the capital. Li Mu, under my orders, has transferred many people from the palace, hastily preparing for the enthronement ceremony. The emperor's dragon robe, the empress's palace dress, the embroiderers are working through the night. To appease Li Xuanga, I even showed him the embroidery patterns, though I fear he doesn't care. Only 4th sister, Ming Zedong, still refuses to settle down. The serving maids presented copied letters, and I learned that she had secretly cut off communication between me and Li Xuanga, and even tried to contact him. I tapped my finger lightly on the desk. You have been serving by her side for a long time, tell me, whose child is Madame Ming's? The maids recounted in detail who she met and what she did since entering the palace. The late emperor treated Madame Ming with the kindness of an elder. There are rumors, but I fear it's not a matter of romance. I frowned slightly. I know that child cannot be the late emperor's. That night, 4th sister had a miscarriage. I ordered the imperial physician to treat her with care, but she cursed at me, blaming me for killing her child. In fact, I had that intention, but I hadn't had time to act. She chased away the servants, leaving herself alone. One night I couldn't sleep. Strolling through Changning Palace, I saw a faint candlelight. Pushing the door open, I saw her standing in front of the bronze mirror. She was wearing the empress's palace dress, but the wide sleeves covered her hands, the oversized skirt touched the ground, and she walked unsteadily. You aborted your child yourself, just to fulfill your dream of becoming empress? Ming Zedong turned around. The phoenix hairpin in her hair jingled softly. Have you forgotten? The late emperor once bestowed a marriage. I am Li Xuange's legitimate wife, the future empress. She looked out the window dreamily, muttering, "Luckily, I helped you with that matter. I helped him. He must give me this position." "So, you helped me open the windows at night." It was her. If Zhao had known that, he wouldn't have been betrayed by her. "Fourth sister, go back and rest. Don't be crazy." She looked at me, her voice resentful. "Min Washu, I hate your calmness the most. In prison that year, you told me I would be fine. In the end, the late emperor almost killed me. I was still calm. If I told you then that you would die, the late emperor might not have acted, but it would also prove that our magic didn't work, and all four of us would die. I was originally a disaster from the sky." She laughed coldly. "In that case, I saved you all. The Ming family owes me a life." I calmly looked at her. 10 years of friendship. I have never mistreated you. Now this is happening, just because of a sentence in prison." Ming Zedong was silent for a long time, stepped closer, her eyes gradually turning cold. "Wang Wen, when only I don't fit in, you all know magic, only I can't learn it, disaster strikes, and it comes to me first." She said each word. "Min Washu, how can I not hate you?" She leaned close to me. I lowered my eyes coldly. "Fourth sister, this sounds like you're blaming me for not helping you? I should have let you continue begging at the foot of White Cloud Mountain instead of standing here blaming fate." Her eyes froze. "Yes, I blame myself for not having parents like you, not having the talent like you, not having someone who loves me like you, but I don't blame myself. I tried my best." She laughed, her eyes filled with crazed tears. "Third sister, you lied to me too, right? Luckily, I didn't believe you. I didn't choose Tui Song but Li Xuanga. I gave him the map of the palace's secret passages. He will bring his army into the palace and make me empress." At the end of the palace wall, the flickering lights moved like dots. "Li Xuanga, he's here." I slightly pursed my lips, smiling sadly. "You didn't choose Tui Song. You don't know what you missed." She lowered her head and sneered. I looked at her right sleeve and said calmly, "If you let go of what's in your hand now, I'm willing to spare your life." She looked at me in horror, as if seeing a ghost, her lips trembling. "You knew? Could it be that you?" She muttered, her face ferocious. "I don't believe it." She pulled out a knife and rushed towards me. I was about to step back when an arrow flew and pierced her chest. Her hand stopped in midair, her feet unsteady. I pulled out the phoenix hairpin and stabbed it straight into her throat, letting the hot blood spray on my face, still holding her tightly. Not letting go, and then she fell into my arms, resting her chin on my shoulder, her breath weak. "Sister, what did I miss in the end?" I gently hugged her. "Your mother loved you very much her whole life." In the darkness, she turned her head with difficulty, her eyes wide open, tears streaming down. "Who is she?" I closed my eyes, tears falling. She leaned on my shoulder, her body limp, and fell to the ground, her lips still moving slightly. "Who is?" I closed her eyes. "Little sister didn't let you know. Luo Wei is good for you." Li Xuanga jumped off his horse, rushed over, and hugged me tightly. "Is she okay?" I was stunned. After a moment, I came back to my senses, looked up at him, and tightened my embrace. "I was so scared you finally came back." He lowered his head and stroked my hair. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have left her behind." I sobbed in his arms, choked with emotion. "How many troops did you bring into the palace?" He gently wiped away my tears. 5,000. The other 45,000 are stationed outside the capital. With me here, no one dares to bully you." I forced a smile. He said softly, "Don't force a smile. If you're not happy, then don't." The adjutant came to ask about the next step. He replied, "Now that we're in the palace, immediately replace all the guards with my men." I quickly stopped him. "We can't." He was surprised. I coughed lightly. "The guards are controlled by Li Mu. It's like hitting ourselves." I summoned Li Mu. He brought people and saluted a bit nervously. Luckily, Li Xuanga recognized him and had the adjutant coordinate the takeover. I led him to my bedroom. He was embarrassed. "Going to your place?" I nodded. Behind the palace there was a hot spring. In the misty steam, he leaned against the edge of the pool. closing his eyes to rest. I stood behind the screen, quietly watching his back. Limu tiptoed over. Master has 3 plans. The best, poison, break bones. The middle, bewitching incense, then kill. The worst, strangle with a towel. I looked at him and pondered, leave the towel, retreat. He handed over the towel and instructed, remember to use force. I stepped forward, placing my hand on his arm. He suddenly opened his eyes, grabbed my hand, and said in a low voice, I'm not lecherous, we can wait until the wedding. I asked softly, there's an old saying, beauty and power, you can only have one, what does the general choose? He tilted his head, power and you? I choose you. I smiled softly, wrong, if it were me, I would want both. He laughed and blushed, asking me to let him out. I moved closer, my hand gliding through the water, just consider me lecherous. He stayed in my bedroom for 3 days and 3 nights, not seeing anyone. The adjutant petitioned several times, I stopped them all. He woke up, put on his clothes, blew out the candle, and opened the window. Sunlight shone in, he shielded his eyes and frowned. Is this how you used me? I was calm, it doesn't harm the body. I have an imperial edict, you choose beauty, what if the beauty wants power? He opened it and sneered, an edict to make me empress. Is this a surrender? It's not a surrender, it's keeping my word. You said if you became emperor you would make me empress. Now I'm the emperor, making you the empress. He was angry. Even if you captured 5,000 troops, defeated those 50,000 troops, my father will still send troops to support, it's useless. I stood outside and looked up, then fight. Now I have the Zhao family, behind me is the royal family, there's the Duke of Xing, I am the legitimate heir, your father is the rebel. Victory is uncertain, at the fastest 3 years, at the longest 70 or 80 years. I give you the imperial edict, make 3 wins, wouldn't being my empress be good? He avoided my eyes. I accept the edict, what about my father? I will make him the national father. He trembled, finally clenched the edict, grinding his teeth. Minwashu, you treat me like a dog. After saying that, he still took the edict and left, reading it carefully as he walked. Limu asked, did you tell him his family is in our hands? I shook my head, no need yet. He was surprised, I didn't expect him to be the easiest to deal with. I turned around, changed the form of address. Limu was stunned, then clasped his hands and knelt down. Your Majesty, long live, long live. A month later, I ascended the throne and became emperor. Bestowing Li Xuanga as the empress, honoring the Duke of Xing, Yang Xiao, as the supreme emperor. Bestowing Ming Wangchuan as the grand princess, Ming Wenxia as the princess, posthumously honoring the daughter of the Duke of Xing, Yang Heng, as the Shunwan princess. I respected Li Xuanga's father, Li Zan, and made him the national father. He was so angry that he fell ill and wrote dozens of letters scolding Li Xuanga. Li Xuanga replied, advising, this woman is the destined one, lucky to be cared for by your son. Your grandson is also blessed by the emperor's grace. It is my merit, if you don't thank me, fine, but to blame me, how ungrateful. Hearing that Li Zan was ill, I immediately sent Li Mu to the northern border, to help with some of the burden. The wise king, Zhao Mingcheng, personally returned to Yanling and divorced the wise king's wife, Ming Wangchuan. My uncle only said, I am addicted to politics, escaping the court, the storms are unpredictable, I am not a good husband for her. Eldest sister also accepted it calmly. When she married the wise king, it was originally my father's plan. Later it was only 4 choices, wanting to choose a virtuous person. Ming Wangchuan stayed in Yanling, shaved her head and became a nun. Second sister had fully recovered, and I welcomed her back. I led her to meet her old enemy, Crown Prince Zhaozha. Zhaozha was imprisoned in the East Palace, quietly sitting in the room, his eyes blankly looking at the window. Occasionally a sparrow would fly by, and his eyes would slightly move, smiling foolishly. Seeing that, Ming Wenxia smiled coldly. Your Highness, you were selfish and cruel. Now this is your end. It truly pleases the people. Zhaozha heard the voice, his body stiffened, slowly turned his head, looked up at her, not caring much. Useless. only able to help to this extent. Second sister's eyes rose with hatred, as if remembering something. Turn him around. Don't give him good food, only a bowl of bran every day so he can live in hunger. I nodded. After all, I only promised Zhaozha to keep him alive. Ming Wenxia calmly looked at him. Your Highness, years ago you saved us from the famine. Now you must repay it for the rest of your life. Zhaozha slightly pursed his lips, turned his face away without replying. I placed a gold hairpin in the shape of a phoenix tail on the table, a relic of the late empress, returning it to its original owner. Zhaozha stared at it, suddenly snatched it up, clenching it in his hand. Where is she? Is she still alive? I calmly looked at him. Dead. You. He looked at me, his face pale, trembling uncontrollably. The child is also gone. She aborted it herself. She thought that if Li Xuanga came back, he would make her empress. Zhaozha slowly lowered his head, wiping his face with his sleeve, leaving 2 faint lines of tears, smiling sadly. She was so stupid. I coldly looked at him. I'm afraid you don't know. Fourth sister was picked up by me at the foot of White Cloud Temple. She was born afraid of the cold, her skin pale white. Later I learned that her heart was under her throat. I used this hairpin to end her life. I paused, looking directly into Zhaozha's eyes. The foot of White Cloud Temple is near Jiangtan Wharf. Perhaps that year the child that the Empress Dowager said was choked by river water, it was also what caused her to be poisoned and feign death to live again. Do you believe it? Zhaozha's eyes widened, as if about to burst, his fingers gripping the edge of the table until it bled. You're talking nonsense? Minwashu? You're talking nonsense. Am I talking nonsense? Your father never touched her, only let her meet the noble consort. But fourth sister was stubborn. She clashed with the noble consort. At that time the noble consort was ill, so that... It's not like family wealth, where a father hands things down, a son harms his father, siblings fight, or spouses turn on each other. Who's to say that an adopted kid is better than a grandchild with your own blood? As I left the tent, I found myself stopped by drawn swords and had to step back. That scared me, but Gu Zhenjing yelled, "Foster father, have you thought this through? Isn't it better to enjoy old age surrounded by kids and grandkids? That child is your direct heir, the one A Hung gave her life to protect for you." Suddenly, Yang Xiao gripped his teacup, grinding his teeth and pressing down on the broken pieces of porcelain. He spat out the order, "Let her go." After the Duke of Xing said that, the court's eyes all turned to the wise king. Zhao Mingqing gave a quiet sigh. The little princess from back then. It's likely we don't know if she's even alive. Thinking back over the last 10 years, his gaze went dreamy. That day, I saw from far off on the river a wooden boat with phoenix tail decorations, rising and falling on the waves. It was just about to sink when a wave rolled it, tossing an infant out of its wrappings and into the river. We were going to leave, but we saw the child weakly reaching up, as if it had choked on water but was still alive. We couldn't really see. At that moment, Consort Chui said she'd heard a cry and ordered some men to follow the river's edge, searching for dozens of miles. Yang Xiao went on. After that, the previous emperor ordered a 3-month search, but they never found the princess's body. Zhaozha just froze at those words. She's alive. My mother told me that she definitely drowned, so even if she's alive, how could she be Minwashu? Hearing that, I felt a little something inside. Zhao Mingqiang came back to himself, speaking slowly. I think Consort Chui might have known Washu, and that's why, before dying, she gave her that jade lock meant for the princess. Gripping his sword even tighter, Zhaozha stared at the wise king and the Duke of Xing, his voice shaking as he asked, "You guys?" Leaning back a bit, I whispered in his ear, "Your Highness, you and fourth sister teamed up to hurt the previous emperor. Now, she's turning and biting you. You've reached the end of the road. If you kill me, you're going to die for sure, and she'll be the only one who benefits. Also, the Duke of Xing and his 30,000 elite soldiers are outside the city right now. Think it over." Coldly, I glanced at him. "At least I can keep you alive." Fourth sister stepped forward in front of the Duke of Xing and the wise king, her face lifted, her eyes shining with triumph, and she yelled in our direction. Zhao Zha, you dared poison the late emperor and tried to shut me up. Your crimes are unforgivable. So, what if you're holding my sister? The late emperor loved me. He'll never let you get away with this. On hearing that, Zhao Zha's face turned purple with anger. He shook all over, grinding his teeth. He shoved me forward and threw his sword down hard. Empty-handed, he stepped in front of all the court officials and spoke up. I swear I never wanted to hurt my father, and I'll let anyone investigate. But I can't let someone as disloyal as you be the judge. He pointed right at fourth sister, his voice dripping with scorn. You have no right to speak here. Who knows who fathered the baby you're carrying? Raising his head, he gave a cold laugh as he went on. Don't forget that this Madame Ming was married once before. Maybe that child is actually Li Xuange's. Ming Zedong was completely stunned, anger rising in her. She grabbed Zhao Zha's collar, her mouth clamping shut so hard that it bled, and hissed out each word. Why don't you just die? Zhao Zha brushed her hand off, calmly fixing his collar and laughing coolly. At that moment, he and Ming Zedong were officially enemies. One was accused of hurting the emperor, while the other was pregnant under suspicious circumstances. Neither of them had any right to even think about the throne. Then it's just me left. With no blood spilled, the wise king and the Duke of Xing gently pushed me to the throne. Right then, I gave an order. Zhao Zha, the former crown prince, would be locked up in the East Palace until the truth came out. As for Ming Zedong, we would leave her in the palace to carry her child, and we discussed the matter after she gave birth. The late emperor's body was taken to the imperial tomb. Once everyone was gone, I sat alone on the dragon throne, the jade lock in my hand, a flood of sadness in my heart. Li Mu's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Master, he hesitated before continuing. The general sent another letter. He stopped a moment. You kept telling me to send fake messages to slow his army. Now, hearing that you were in danger, Li Xuange had sent a letter breaking all ties, the writing messy and full of anger. Now that he'd heard I'd taken the throne, he thought I was being tricking him like a dog, and that I was feeling good about it and had probably forgotten all about him. From now on, we would only be facing each other with weapons. He didn't trust me anymore. In short, he was saying congratulations on my scheming, while he was just a pawn. From now on, meeting up would mean swords drawn. Reading it over and over, I slowly picked up my pen and wrote, my husband. Hearing me say that, Li Mu coughed and stammered, I will watch. Quickly bowing his head, he stepped back. I'll keep writing. My husband, why do you let other people turn me into the bad guy? Ever since we parted, I've missed you every day and night and haven't been able to eat or sleep. You've gotten thin, too. They're always lying and putting me down. I didn't have a choice. Here in the capital, I've cleared away everything standing in your way. I hope we can be together again soon. Cutting off a lock of my hair, I tied it with a red thread and sent it with the letter. Receiving the letter, Li Mu hesitated, asking, do you think it'll work? We'll see. 3 days later, Li Xuange sent back a reply. Opening it up, there wasn't any letter, but a tied lock of hair fell out, resting in my hand. Tied together, we'll never doubt each other. Seeing that, Li Mu smiled softly. It worked. Years back, my father predicted that 4 people in the world would be born with the destiny to rule. Now that Cui Song was dead, the crown prince was locked up, and the wise king was helping me. That just left Li Xuange. Standing on the city walls, I gazed out across the shining capital, and it felt like I was back in the past. The night my father gathered us 3 sisters, he'd wanted to use his magic to change our fate. He had to get really close. You 3 will marry 3 of those men, go along with them, and then use magic to switch fates, to turn the world around. Second sister frowned. Father, that's one short. We'll just have to gamble. It went just as our father had said. The 4 of us had married 3, and now there was just 1 left. That night, after second sister and fourth sister left, and it was just me and father, he had a lot to say. I can still hear his voice. With Shu, Wang Chun is gentle and yielding, and Wen Xia is stubborn and easily broken, but in the middle of the night, he stood under the corridor, looking up at the full moon, his robes swaying lightly in the wind. This gamble rests on you, on your destiny. The 7 killings Xiaoshan controls fate stealing. You just need to be with someone long enough, and without even knowing, you'll steal their destiny. 7 killings Xiaoshan, all about taking fates. When the wind rises, the time to act has come. Li Shuange's army was about to enter the capital. On my orders, Li Mu had moved many people from the palace to make preparations for the coronation ceremony. Seamstresses were working all night on the emperor's dragon robes and the empress's palace gowns. To calm Li Shuange, I had even shown him the embroidery designs, although I doubted he cared. Only fourth sister, Ming Zedong, wouldn't calm down. The maids who served her had brought copied letters and told me she had secretly cut off my messages to Li Shuange. She had even tried to contact him. Tapping my finger on the desk, I spoke. You've been serving by her side for so long. Can you tell me, who is the father of Madame Ming's child? The maids explained clearly who she'd met and what she'd done since coming to the palace. The previous emperor had treated Madame Ming with kindness, like an elder. Even if there were rumors, it probably wasn't romantic. I frowned a little, knowing for sure that child wasn't the previous emperor's. That night, fourth sister miscarried, and I ordered the imperial doctor to treat her well, but she just started cursing me and accusing me of killing her child. Honestly, I had considered doing it, but I hadn't had a chance yet. She chased away the servants, leaving herself alone. That night, I couldn't sleep and wandered around Chongning Palace. I saw a faint light shining inside. Pushing open the doors, I saw her standing in front of a bronze mirror, dressed in an empress's palace gown. The sleeves were too long, hiding her hands, and the skirt was dragging on the floor. She could barely walk. You caused your own miscarriage just so you could become empress? Turning around, Ming Zedong's hair ornaments jingled. Have you forgotten? The previous emperor betrothed me, and I am Li Shuange's wife, the future empress. She stared out the window, whispering to herself, it's good that I helped you with that. It's like I helped him. He has to give me this title. So, she was the one opening my windows at night. If Xiaozha had known, he wouldn't have been betrayed by her. Fourth sister, you should go back and rest. You're getting delusional. She stared at me, filled with hate. Minwushu, I hate how calm you always are. In prison that year, you said I would be fine. But the previous emperor almost killed me. I was still calm. If I told you that you were going to die, the previous emperor probably wouldn't have done anything, but it also would have proven that our magic didn't work, and all 4 of us would have died. I was a disaster falling from the sky. She laughed coldly. So, I saved you all? The Ming family owes me a life. Calmly, I looked back at her. We've been friends for 10 years. I've never treated you unfairly, and now this is happening over something said in prison. After a long moment, Ming Zedong stepped closer, her eyes turning cold. Wangwen. I'm the only one who doesn't fit in. You all know magic, but I can't learn it. Trouble always finds me first. Each word she spoke was filled with anger. Minwushu, how can I not hate you? She leaned close. I lowered my gaze, a coldness in my eyes. Fourth sister, are you blaming me for helping you? Maybe I should have left you begging at the foot of White Cloud Mountain instead of standing here and complaining. Her eyes froze. Yes, I blame myself for not having parents like you, or talent like you, or someone who loves me like you. But I can't blame myself. I did my best. She started laughing, tears welling up in her crazed eyes. Third sister, you lied to me too, right? I'm glad I didn't believe you and didn't choose Song. I chose Li Shuange. I gave him the map to the palace's secret passages. He's going to bring his army in and make me empress. At the far edge of the palace walls, moving lights flickered. Li Shuange is here. I smiled sadly. You didn't choose Song, and you don't know what you missed. She lowered her head and laughed scornfully. Glancing at her right sleeve, I asked calmly, if you drop what's in your hand, I'm willing to spare your life. Looking at me with terror, like I was a ghost, she trembled. You knew? Are you? She muttered, her face twisting. I don't believe it. She drew a knife and charged at me. Just as I was stepping back, an arrow flew and stuck in her chest. Her hand froze midair and she stumbled. I pulled out my phoenix hair ornament. and stabbed it into her throat. Hot blood sprayed my face, but I held on tight. Not letting go, she fell into my arms, resting her chin on my shoulder, her breath growing weak. Sister, what did I miss? Gently, I held her. Your mother loved you very much. Struggling, she turned her head in the dark, her eyes wide, tears pouring out. Who is she? Closing my eyes, tears fell. Resting on my shoulder, her body went limp and fell to the ground, her lips barely moving. Who is it? I closed her eyes. Your little sister didn't let you know. Wei wants the best for you. Jumping off his horse, Li Xuanga ran over and held me tight. Are you all right? I stared, uncomprehending. After a moment, coming back to my senses, I looked up at him and held him tighter. I was so afraid. You finally came back. He lowered his head, brushing back my hair. It was my fault. I shouldn't have left you here. Sobbing in his arms, I asked him, how many soldiers did you bring into the palace? Gently wiping away my tears, he replied, 5,000. The other 45,000 are outside the capital. Now that I'm here, no one will hurt you. Giving a weak smile, I said nothing. Softly, he spoke. Don't try to smile if you don't feel like it. An officer came up and asked what to do next. He answered, now that we're. She was ignored. Zhaoji fiercely roared, hussy. You're lying. That child is dead, already dead. From roaring, he gradually lowered his head to the table, sobbing. After a long while, he raised his head, his voice tired. Did you ever say those words to her? I lowered my eyes to look at him. No, I didn't say them. I cherish her. I'm telling you what you must accept. Zhaoji seemed to have lost all his strength, collapsed onto the ground, curled up, clutched the hairpin tightly, buried his face in the floor, and burst into incessant painful cries. I left the East Palace with Mingwenxia. On the way back, I softly asked, second sister, why did you choose the crown prince back then? I tilted my head to look at Mingwenxia. Now it seems, Li Xuanga might not have been more short-lived than him. Mingwenxia looked at me. Even if a big sister isn't perfect, she can't choose the person you like. 5 years later, Duke Yangshao of the Shang Kingdom fell seriously ill. I personally escorted Yang Mingyao back to the southwest to help him inherit the title. On his deathbed, Yangshao lay on the bed, his eyes blurred, his rough hand touching his great-grandson's face. You resemble your mother. Aheng was a good daughter, disliking my rough hands, but never avoiding them. Yang Mingzhao choked with tears. Great-grandfather. Yang Shao seemed to recall Yang Heng, smiling and crying, his breath faltering. But don't be like her. She suffered grievances without speaking, and I didn't know. If I had known, I would have abandoned the empire for you, and even more so for her. I understood the hidden meaning and stepped forward to grasp his hand tightly. Rest assured, father, I will definitely protect Mingzhao. Looking at Yang Shao, who was 75 years old, my nose felt sore. Don't blame me, father. Yang Shao gently shook his head and sighed. I don't blame you. Even though I haven't seen you in many years, I understand your majesty's worries. Your majesty, I once met your late father. He was very accurate in predicting fates. Aheng became a princess, but I couldn't become an emperor. With that, Yang Shao closed his eyes and passed away. Yang Mingzhao, only 5 years old, inherited the title of Duke of the Shang Kingdom. I left behind a team of trusted aides to help him protect the family fortune and prevent relatives from bullying him. Back at the palace, Zhao Mingcheng was waiting. Your Majesty, I want to discuss the matter of establishing a crown prince. I waved my hand. Royal uncle, don't joke. I'm only 25. Zhao Mingcheng followed behind, earnestly persuading, Your Majesty promised me. Now it's been 5 years. Every other day, he would enter the palace just to remind me of the promise I made when I was still in prison under imperial edict. Royal uncle, I already gave you the imperial decree to resist it. Zhao Mingcheng slyly said, Your Majesty changed it to Feng when half a year after ascending the throne. The one I hold is useless now. I smiled, remembering that incident. Oh, I am the female emperor, so I naturally use phoenix as the symbol of honor. Zhao Mingqing sternly said, "Your Majesty promised to be emperor for only one lifetime and would establish a Zhao clan member as the next ruler. You can't break your word." I bent down to help him up. "Royal uncle, rest assured, I haven't forgotten, but I need to think of a new plan." That night, while having dinner with the Empress, I was still worried about the matter of establishing a crown prince, but then I saw him constantly touching my hand. "Empress, please don't be discourteous." Li Xuanga glanced at me and put down his chopsticks. "I'm not eating anymore." "What if I dismiss everyone, what then?" He presented his father's letter, along with an old letter he had written to persuade me to drink tea. The new paper only had 4 words: son, first grandson. Li Xuanga was angry. "Now I've become a grandson." I chuckled and took his hand, placing it on my thigh. He tilted his head, took my hand back, and looked at me calmly. 5 years, haven't you figured it out yet? If you don't need me, find someone else." I squeezed his hand. "Why would you say that? You and I are a married couple with intertwined hair." That was because his father was uneasy. Li Mu had been fighting in the war for 5 years. The northern frontier still had enemies. How could I dare to have a child for him? Li Xuanga lowered his head, his hand gently caressing my cheek. "Your Majesty originally didn't like military generals, so you shouldn't have made me empress in the first place." I looked up at him and chuckled softly. "Who said I don't like them? I like military generals the most. My harem only has you." At that time, I was just worried about the military changes in the northern frontier, but for the past 5 years, I had only favored Li Xuanga. The Li family already had enough prestige. It was just that Li Zan was still unwilling to relinquish power. Having a child at this time would only be more dangerous. That night, I persuaded the Empress. 3 months later, Li Mu sent news that Li Zan was preparing to transfer military power. I immediately ordered the imperial physicians to care for the Empress's health. The entire palace knew about this. Early the next morning, Zhao Mingqing was already kneeling outside the palace, questioning, "Your Majesty wants to give birth to imperial offspring, planning to establish a child from the Li family as the crown prince?" I held a palace lantern, gently opened the palace door, and squinted at him. "Royal uncle, it's not even dawn yet." He tightly hugged my leg, pleading incessantly, "Your Majesty is not an ordinary woman. Giving birth to a child might harm the country." I raised my hand to cover my face, feigning sadness. "Royal uncle doesn't know. Last night I dreamed of my mother. She was crying in heaven, saying she only wanted to hold her grandson. Otherwise, she wouldn't rest in peace under the 9 springs." I then devised a plan. "How about royal uncle select a few people from the Zhao clan to enter the palace together? They would have my blood and also be descendants of the Zhao clan." Zhao Mingqiang immediately praised my wisdom, calling me a born emperor. Half a month later, the Xian prince's mansion presented 2 beautiful men as tribute. Li Xuanga angrily stayed in Changning Palace, blaming me. I failed to coax someone for the first time. Everywhere began to secretly guess the imperial will, and more beautiful men were presented. Even my second sister, Ming Wenxia, presented 2 young men. I don't trust others to present them, so I'm presenting 2 good brothers aged 18, a few years younger than Li Xuanga. I looked at the memorial and smiled lightly. "Don't let the Empress hear that, or he'll make things difficult for you." More than 10 male consorts were added to the harem. Most notably, Li Zan even presented a distant younger cousin of Li Xuanga, who somewhat resembled him and was 7 or 8 years younger. I returned only this person. I only visited a few people, one from the Xian prince's mansion, one from the Xing duke's mansion, and one from my second sister. Half a year later, I became pregnant. Zhao Mingqing led the imperial hospital, holding a register of imperial visits, examining them for half a day. It was difficult to guess, impossible to know whose child it was. He closed the register, looking at me with an extremely complex expression. I stroked my belly and smiled softly. "Royal uncle, I bestow my favor equally. Whoever has the ability, that person has a child." Zhao Mingqing had no choice but to pray to Guanyin, hoping the child would be of the Zhao clan bloodline. Li Xuanga pressed his hand on my belly. I'll write a letter to my father, saying this is my child. I hugged him, gently saying, after I give birth to the child, I'll let you send everyone in the palace away. In the 6th year, in the middle of winter, I gave birth to a daughter, named Mingjin, and established her as the crown princess. Mingjin was raised by the empress from a young age, taught by Li Xuanga himself, skilled in both literary and martial arts, and of pure and kind character. Li Xuanga had the grace of raising the crown princess. Even though they were not blood-related, their bond was stronger than blood ties. Li Zan completely let down his guard at this time. In the 10th year, when Mingjin turned 4, Li Zan handed over all military power to Li Mu, left the northern frontier thousands of miles away to return to the capital, attended the crown princess's birthday banquet, and lived out his old age in peace. That day, Mingjin climbed onto Li Zan and, following what Li Xuanga taught, called him Grandpa. Li Zan picked her up, looked at her carefully, and couldn't tell if she was of the Li family bloodline or not. At that time, snow fell lightly. Li Zan handed Mingjin back to the palace staff and inadvertently looked up, immediately meeting my gaze. I stood silently on the white jade steps, wearing a black robe embroidered with phoenixes, with the guard Yang Wu behind me, smiling at him. I sat on the dragon throne, and Li Zan stood below the dragon dais. After 15 years, I finally met General Li again. Li Zan slightly twitched his earlobe, glanced behind him, and immediately recognized the executioners hidden on both sides of the hall. He closed his eyes slightly and sighed. As expected, Your Majesty held such a grudge. For the past 10 years, rumors have spread that a daughter of the Ming family ascended the throne. I thought I was being too suspicious. Entering the palace today is considered to resolve a worry. I clenched the armrest of the dragon throne, slowly stroking it. The hatred for killing my mother, who could forget? Li Zan, do you know why I had to wait so many years? Our Ming family originally came from a lineage of numerologists. So many people in the world use gold, silver, wealth, and power to threaten us, begging us to predict their fates. If I or my father wanted you dead, killing you 100 times, 1,000 times, what difficulty would there be? Li Zan's voice echoed in the great hall. Then Your Majesty waited so long just to sit on the dragon throne and personally tell me that the Li family must never claim the throne? I looked down from above, coldly speaking. Li Zan, your vision only extends this far. I waited 15 years, waiting for you to hand over military power, just to kill you without destroying the overall situation of the world, without causing chaos in the northern frontier, without causing the people to fall into the sea of fire. I stepped down from the dragon throne step by step, my eyes as cold as ice, my voice sharp. It is precisely shallow people like you who could incite Cui to entangle my mother, forcing her to extract celestial secrets from my father, forcing her to commit suicide. That year, the fire in Dongqing Alley that abandoned my mother was precisely Li Zan's younger brother. After my mother died, my father secretly investigated it. I once secretly followed him, seeing him enter and leave the old Li family residence, sending the red blood parrot flying over the wall, hearing his secret talks with Li Zan. It turned out that Li Zan repeatedly asked my father to predict his fate, but was rejected, so he ordered his younger brother to use his past feelings for my mother to obtain celestial secrets, especially to know whether the Li family could claim the throne. In the end, my father killed that man as easily as turning his hand, but Li Zan held 200,000 troops in the northern frontier, so he couldn't be easily touched. To kill him, only the emperor could do it without causing chaos in the world. My father then announced the prophecy. The Son of Heaven will appear from among those 4 people, extending the fate chart, reversing the stars, 15 years of wind and cloud. Li Zan admitted to pushing my mother to her death, but refused to commit suicide. Your Majesty, now I don't dare to consider myself your elder, but if you kill me, aren't you afraid Xuanga will turn against you? I stepped down to face him, smiling softly. Generally, thanks to you, I met Xuanga. You don't know that my fate is extremely domineering, 7 killings, arrogant god, specializing in seizing luck. The closer someone is to me, the more I seize their destiny. 2 or 3 people have already proven it. I bent down and pulled out a dagger from the gold tray, my voice calm. That year your father wanted me to convey a message. Your son, Li Xuanga, has an unparalleled noble fate, benevolent and loyal. He is the Ziwei Emperor star. For guards pressed Li Zan to kneel on the ground. He raised his head, grinding his teeth, then he guessed wrong. I gently stabbed the dagger into his chest. No, it's that I have seized his imperial fate. Do you think I'm a good emperor? I let go. Li Zan fell face down on the floor, blood staining the jade floor red, gradually spreading into a large pool. I stood up, calmly stepping on it, leaving blood-stained footprints, step by step out of the hall. Outside, the wind howled and snow covered the ground, the scenery covered in white. I was slightly dazed, not knowing how long I had been in there. In the distance, Li Xuanga was playing with Mingjin in the courtyard. Mingjin saw me and cheered, running over, "Mother." She held out a handful of snow, lowered her head, seeing the bloodstains under my feet. "What's this?" Li Xuanga covered his daughter's eyes, softly saying, "Mingjin, don't look." I looked at my daughter, smiling and bending down. "Mingjin, there are 2 kinds of snow in the world, one in your hand, one under your mother's feet. Both can cleanse the world." Li Xuanga looked at me, smiling softly. He handed Mingjin back to me, asked, "Your Majesty, where's my father?" My hand trembled. I was silent for a long time before daring to raise my head. He changed color, staggered back, wanting to rush into the hall. I grabbed his sleeve, my voice hoarse. "Li Xuanga, don't look." In the 20th year, Mingjin was 14 years old. It was a very long spring. Zhao Mingqing secretly fell ill. At first, it was just a cold. He still tried to attend court. I sent someone to bring him a chair to sit on. Later he became more ill. I'd kept him in the palace for easy care, but it still didn't get better. His condition worsened. I scolded the imperial hospital, but Zhao Mingqing stopped me. He lay on the bed, his face pale, his hands tightly holding mine, his fingers gently stroking the back of my hand. "Your Majesty, please don't be angry. This old servant is already old. How is 50 not round 50? Not everyone is as long-lived as Yang Shao." I squeezed his hand, lowered my head to look, tears welling up in my eyes. "Royal uncle, don't say that. Don't you still want to see me cede the throne to the Zhao family?" Zhao Mingqing smiled softly, his voice weak. "Your Majesty can also say that now. You are the child of a physiognomist and know better than me. Can I still live longer?" I paused. He looked up at the bed curtains as if recalling the past. "Remember that year, when I first met your Majesty in prison edict? I thought you were dreaming. Now lying here, I am hazy and muddled, not knowing whether meeting you that year was a dream or whether the peace of the world today is just a dream." He gradually let go of my hand, gently closing his eyes. I panicked and grabbed his hand, sobbing uncontrollably by the bed. The Xian Prince Zhao Mingqing, a loyal minister of 3 dynasties, dedicated himself wholeheartedly until his death. The coffin was kept in the palace for 3 days, the entire palace mourning and bidding farewell to the virtuous prince. After 20 years, I returned to the old East Palace, meeting an old friend again. Weeds grew everywhere, the walls were rotten, the water basin was broken and dry, spiderwebs were strung across the eaves. The old servant led me to a room, throwing a broken porcelain bowl in to test the waters, and then a skinny, bony hand grabbed onto the windowsill. Zhaoji poked his head out, his hair disheveled, his face unrecognizable, only thanks to the golden hairpin in his hand. Did I recognize him? He was frighteningly thin. He stared blankly at me, only muttering one word, "Eat." He wanted to eat rice. The old servant said, even though he only ate rice bran, he still lived persistently. Someone tried to steal the golden hairpin and was beaten to near death by him. That was his mother's keepsake. He naturally cherished it. I took 2 more steps, gently waving my hand. "I've come to deliver a message. Your royal uncle is dead." Zhaoji stared blankly at me, his lips trembling. "Royal uncle. He cherished you very much. All these years I've kept your life out of respect for him. Now it's over, you can go after him and apologize." I waved my hand. Several eunuchs and guards rushed into the room with white silk. Inside there was a violent struggle. The former crown Prince Zhaoji, hearing the news of the Xian prince's death, was overwhelmed with grief and hanged himself in the East Palace. At dusk, several palace maids carried lanterns along the stone steps, lighting up the four corners of the stone lanterns one by one. Seeing me, they hurriedly put down the lanterns, kneeling and saluting. I quickly passed by, going straight to Chongning Palace. The palace doors were closed. Someone said Li Xuanga was ill and couldn't receive guests. I stood outside the door for a long time, leaning against the door, slowly saying, Li Xuanga, the Xian prince is gone. He said he was old, do you know? I'm also 39 years old. I don't have another 10 years to waste with you. Looking up at the crescent moon, sighing softly, I admit I killed your father, because he killed my mother. I clearly distinguish between public and private matters. I have never blamed you. If you're not happy, I'll let you go. The palace door suddenly opened. I fell into his arms. Looking up, our eyes met. He supported my waist with one hand, his eyes icy cold, full of resentment. Mingwushu, what else do you want? Back then it was the military tally, then the throne, the military power of the northern frontier, the life of my father. What else do you want now? Say it. At first he was calm, then he trembled, tears welling up, his voice choked. You say it? What else can I give you? My chest ached like needles. I hugged him, gently replying, go with me to the end of my life. In the 33rd year, I fell seriously ill. The lamp was running out of oil. I was always vaguely falling asleep, but I was very afraid to close my eyes. Originally teaching Mingjin to review memorials, I suddenly woke up to see Li Xuanga feeding me medicine. I wearily rested my head on his hand. Li Xuanga, I want to eat pastries. I want to sit in a carriage and eat them. His hand trembled, putting down the bowl of medicine. Your Majesty can't eat that. You need to drink the medicine to get better. I raised my head and smiled. I can't get better anymore. Even my second sister dared not lie to me when she visited. I'm about to die. Li Xuanga, you looked at me and smiled tearfully. Yes, you're about to die. I raised my hand to wipe away his tears. Mingjin is 24 years old now. Do you think she can be emperor? He took my hand, lowered his head, pressing his face against my hand. You're going first and still want a plan for after your death? You're so good. You're really very good. I tried to stroke his face and slowly let go, lying down. Mingjin will inherit the throne. You're only 52 years old. I originally wanted to let you be buried with me, but now I can't bear to. I tapped the edge of the bed. There's a secret decree here. Take it out and burn it. He did as he was told, reading it carefully and smiling faintly. The edict to make you empress was perfunctory, but the secret decree for burial was careful. I smiled, tears falling. The edict to make you empress was written to be finished. You would be satisfied no matter what. As for this, I was afraid you would hate me for being cruel and blame me for being heartless. He gently folded the secret decree, but you once wrote something worse, the letter of entreaty from that year. Then he gently closed his eyes, a smile on his lips, slowly reading out, Husband, how can you allow people to slander and bring disaster upon this concubine? Since the day of separation, I have thought of you day and night, unable to eat or sleep, my appearance withering. After reading, he looked at me. Not a single word is true. I stared at him, chuckling. Actually, one sentence is true. I hope you return soon. I took his hand, wearily wanting to close my eyes, seeing him pick up the spoon of medicine and then put it down, directly picking up the bowl and drinking it all. I panicked. Li Xuanga, don't. He smiled softly. Mingwushu, don't be afraid. His finger wiped away a tear from the corner of my eye. I won't leave you behind a second time. The poison took effect quickly. He curled up trembling, still trying to look at me. Since the day of separation, I have thought of you day and night, unable to eat or sleep, my appearance withering. He leaned in wanting to kiss me. I choked and welcomed it. He whispered, his voice so small that only I could hear it. I was also sincere. After separating, I thought of you day and night, unable to eat well, unable to sleep well, my body and mind withering. Ming Shu, I sincerely think I love, remember, hate you so. I cried silently. Empress Li Xuanga committed suicide by drinking poison to be buried with me. In the final moment, my eyes couldn't see clearly, my mouth couldn't speak, only my ears faintly heard many voices. Mingjin, Yang Mingzhao, eldest sister, second sister Li Mu. The voices gradually faded away, gradually faded and then disappeared. I seemed to see that year again. The young Li Xuanga jumped over the wall, holding a bright red parrot in his hand. This is your bird. I nodded, yes, you returned it to me, pointing to the building inside. I've seen you coming for days. My father is in a meeting. Anyone who enters will meet with disaster. I softly asked, who is your father? Li Zan. Then I'll jump down the wall. He suddenly grabbed my hand, hesitatingly asking, what's your father's name? I coldly said, what do you want to know for? He looked at me, pursing his lips seriously replying, I want to propose marriage. I stood on the wall, facing those eyes. My mother is just passed away. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. I'll see you in the next story. Had recently passed. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to the story I shared with you all today. If you found it to be interesting or enjoyable, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. All of your support is greatly appreciated. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next story that I have to share.